Calling the meeting to order. Pursuant to the order of reference for Thursday, February 6, 2020, Bill C-4, an act to implement the agreement between Canada, the United States of America, and the United Mexican States. Welcome to our witnesses, and good morning to our committee members and a few friends we have visiting today. Welcome to everybody. Introduce the witnesses. For the Canadian Global Affairs Institute, Colin Robertson, and from MLTC Resource Development and Norsas Forest Products, we have Al Belinsky and Tracy Gorsey. And from the Research Québécois sur l'intégration continentale, we have Claude Valancourt and Norman Pepin. And from Vitalist Nutrition, Philip Vanderpoel, President and Chief Executive Officer. Mr. Vanderpoel, would you like to lead off, please?
Sure. Thank you, and good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. I would like to thank you for the invitation to appear today to discuss the implications of CUSMA on Canada's dairy industry and on Vitalis specifically. My name is Phil Vanderpoel. I'm the President and CEO of Vitalis Nutrition, a processor of value-added dairy ingredients. Founded as a family business over 65 years ago, Vitalis is a leading producer of high-value, customized dairy ingredients for the world's food, beverage, and nutritional industries. At our advanced facilities and FSSC 22000 certified processing plants located in British Columbia and in Manitoba, we process milk supplied by Canadian farmers into high-quality cream and butter, milk protein concentrates, and milk protein isolates that have superior quality, nutritional value, and functionality. Our products are used in multiple applications such as nutrition bars, protein drinks, infant formula, baking, confectionery, dairy product, snack foods, and much more. Vitalis supplies cream and butter to Canadian markets and milk protein concentrates and isolates to both domestic markets and to over 20 international markets. In 2018, we expanded our BC facility and commissioned a new plant to produce Vitagas, a high-value prebiotic dairy ingredient, also known as galacto-oligosaccharides. Vitagas is used extensively in infant formula as well as digestive health products. As one of only a few plants in the world producing this product, Vitalis is the first to manufacture this type of product in North America. Vitalis has a solid reputation and a strong brand recognition in the B2B marketplace. This is based on our unwavering commitment to quality, efficiency, custom capabilities, and customer service. At Vitalis, we've been able to capitalize on the growth in the nutritional value-added global dairy ingredients market. We have achieved double-digit revenue growth over the past 3 years, with the trend expected to continue this year. Our 3-year compound annual growth rate on revenue has increased 49% from 2017 through to 2019, and we are forecasting continued growth into 2020. We have achieved this growth by successfully expanding sales of our milk protein concentrates and isolates into global markets, while also meeting the growth in demand for butterfat in the Canadian marketplace. This is evidenced by our export volume results from 2017 to 2019, which I will share with you. We have increased our export volumes in the last 3 years by 171% to Europe, thanks certainly in part to CIIT, 132% to the US market, 135% to the Middle East and North African markets, and 65% increase to Asia. We have achieved this result by establishing long-term collaborative relationships with multinational food and beverage manufacturers around the world that value Canadian dairy ingredients. As the second largest food processing industry in Canada, the dairy sector contributes more than $20 billion annually to the country's economy. With Vitalis's export growth over the past 3 years, we are certainly contributing to Canada achieving its growth targets in the agri-food sector. Between our 2 processing facilities, we employ over 200 highly skilled people, and we remain a proudly Canadian company. Dairy processors, including Vitalis, have been motivated to continue the pattern of growth and move the industry and Canada forward. However, the pending implementation of CUSMA, along with the concessions that were made in dairy, threaten to curb this growth and diminish the long-term competitiveness of the sector. The Canadian dairy industry is experiencing a processing capacity shortfall that is expected to increase significantly in the near future due to a lack of sufficient investment in milk drying plants. With pending plant closures as well, there may also be a decrease in the drying capacity of skim milk powder. Skim milk powder is generally produced to deal with the excess solids non-fat that is produced as a result of meeting the butterfat demands within the Canadian market. As you probably are aware, the domestic demand for butterfat continues to increase, and the lack of skim milk powder drying capacity already unbalances the system and will only get worse going forward. With the implementation of CUSMA, skim milk powder and milk protein concentrates will be subjected to export volume caps as well as an export tax on volumes over the cap, which will make it financially unfeasible to export. It is important to note that milk protein concentrates over 85% in protein level and milk protein isolates are exempt from the export caps and tax. Building and operating a milk protein isolate plant, however, is a very costly endeavor with a long-term payback. The changes in the Canadian dairy processing environment, market demand for high-value dairy ingredients, and pending CUSMA ratification have prompted the industry to work collaboratively to reach a solution for continued industry growth and long-term sustainability. Vitalis has been part of the solution dialogue for the past 2 years. We strove to find the best solution for the projected excess solids non-fat, specifically in Western Canada, not just looking at the short term, but looking at a plan that will help for the next 10 plus years. We took into consideration the need for a staged volume increase in milk production to meet the needs of the Canadian market for butterfat. We also reviewed the geographical and environmental implications as well as the handling of the byproducts. Dairy producers and processors in Western Canada are poised to invest in a long-term solution to address all the previously mentioned issues. However, we require tangible commitments from government to proceed. We are specifically requesting that CUSMA does not come into force until August 1st, 2020. This will provide the industry additional time to implement the significant changes required to deal with the declining export volume caps placed on dairy. It will also provide the necessary time for Vitalis to develop additional milk protein isolate markets, products which are not subject to the export caps and tax. We also require prioritization of export allocation volumes within the export volume caps to milk protein concentrates. By prioritizing milk protein concentrates, we will be able to make the additional capital investments required to convert skim milk powder and milk protein concentrate production over a sufficient period of time into milk protein isolates, which, as mentioned previously, are not subject to export restrictions. Our stakeholders will require assurances that the ramifications to the dairy sector have been addressed by this government, promise compensation dollars to processors for all recent trade deals have been finalized, and that they will defend our industry going forward. Lastly, I want to emphasize that this Made in Canada solution benefits the entire dairy industry and will contribute to Canada's prosperity by safeguarding current and future investments, jobs, and the growth of Canada's dairy processing sector from the negative impacts of CUSMA. Thank you for allowing me the time to present to you, and I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Van Peel. We will go on now to Canadian Global Affairs by video conference. Mr. Robertson, you're in a much warmer place than here in Ottawa today.
That's true. Chair, my remarks draw from my previous experience as a Foreign Service officer serving on the teams that negotiated the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement and the NAFTA, my postings in New York, as Consul General in Los Angeles, and as first head of the Advocacy Secretariat at our Washington Embassy, and more recently as a member of the Trade Advisory Committee, the Deputy Minister of International Trade. I encourage members to pass the legislation implementing the Canada-US-Mexico Agreement. Trade agreements are like riding a bicycle. Keep cycling, and when you hit bumps, make adjustments as necessary, but keep cycling. CUSMA is the best possible agreement under the circumstances. Not perfect, but for Canada, it both preserves access to our largest market and preserves the North American platform incorporating Mexico. The Canada-Mexico story gets scant attention, but it's the hidden treasure of the NAFTA story. Mexico is now our third largest trading partner, and as we witnessed, a valuable partner and ally in recent trade negotiations with the Trump administration. Not just the new NAFTA, but in reversing US protectionism through country of origin labeling. The new agreement is not perfect. It is freer trade, not free trade. But consider where we started. President Trump claimed it was the worst deal ever negotiated. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross said it was for Mexico and Canada to give and the United States to get. The Trump administration thought they had us over a barrel because we, Mexico and Canada, were much more dependent on the US than they are on us. We each account for close to 18% of US exports. Well, for us, the US takes almost 75% of our exports. Mexico, it's about 80%. Trade generates 2/3 of our GDP, making us the 12th largest export economy in the world. For the US, trade represents just 27% of its GDP. Mr. Trump well understood these asymmetries. Despite these disadvantages, we updated the NAFTA with new chapters on digital intellectual property, labor and the environment, while keeping dispute settlement and supply management. At the same time, we managed to drown investor state provisions. The unjust steel and aluminum tariffs are gone. Our auto trade is managed trade, a bit like that of softwood lumber, but we should be able to manage this to support jobs and more investment. Thanks to the Democrats in the House of Representatives, our gives on patent protection for biologic drugs that would have raised healthcare costs for provinces were rolled back. The Democrats also secured better enforcement on environmental and labor provisions, all of which we had sought in the negotiations. In short, we have a high-quality North American trade agreement, something we sought to obtain through the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Instead, we now have an up-to-date Canada-US-Mexico agreement with the advantage over the US in Trans-Pacific and Transatlantic markets through CPTPP and CITA. This leads me to my recommendations. First, CUSMA is the result of an all-of-Canada effort involving the Prime Minister, ministers, premiers, parliamentarians, and legislators, business and labor leaders, all working their American counterparts with complementary messages and purpose. This work must continue and become a permanent campaign. American protectionism is older than the Republic, and it will continue no matter who is president. Trade diversification, yes, but we cannot change geography. And that geography gives us access to the biggest and most innovative market in the world. Working Capitol Hill daily from our embassy and through my experience at our consulates, I learned that just as all politics is local, so is all trade. While we can't make donations to campaigns, we can illustrate the jobs that Canadian trade and investment create by district and by state. We need to keep this data current. Parliamentarians need to keep reminding Americans of these facts and do this through regular meetings with US legislators, local, state, and federal. There are lots of opportunities, not just the Canada-US Interparliamentary Group, but regional conferences of state and national legislators, important forums like PINWAR and NASCOPE, as well as the sectoral industry and farm group meetings. You need to be there to develop relationships and to make the case for Canada. Use your travel points to go to Washington, and I encourage you to adjust the rules for travel throughout the United States. As you will appreciate, nothing is better than a meeting on your home turf. Second, with the trade agreement in place, there is still unfinished business when it comes to regulation and infrastructure. The thicket of national, provincial, and local regulations and standards need to be harmonized or made complementary. CUSMA helps, but we're also making, through separate initiatives, launched by the Harper government and Obama administration on regulatory cooperation and beyond the border. These have been continued by the Trudeau government and the Trump administration. They continue, but after the initial burst of enthusiasm, I'm afraid they're now buried within our bureaucracies. Progress requires political oversight by this committee, hearings to identify the roadblocks, raise consciousness, and keep government's noses to the grindstones. Your constituents will thank you. People in trade pass through our border points as well as roads, rails, hydro and pipelines, bridges and tunnels, airports and rail stations. They need improvement. Too often they are choke points that hamper passage and productivity. Canada has an infrastructure program, but is it moving fast enough? This should be an area of close collaboration by all levels of government. Again, parliamentary oversight of progress is essential. The US administration and Congress are already talking about $1 trillion infrastructure program. We need to ensure it is complementary to our efforts, and because procurement is not part of CUSMA, leave it to governors and premiers to work out a procurement agreement as we did in 2010. Harvard's Belfer Center points out that North America is the next great emerging market, possessing abundant energy, a skilled workforce, technology, and a big market. But we need infrastructure. Meanwhile, we enjoy first mover advantage over the US with the European Union and CPTPP nations, but only if we seize these opportunities. Our competitiveness depends on our ability to get goods quickly to market, whether in North America or across our ocean. It will always be the United States and then the rest. Anyone in business will tell you market intelligence is essential, whether you are buying or selling. How many of you, for example, can tell your constituents how many of their jobs depend on US investment and trade? We can do it for the US, and the Business Council of Canada has created an interactive map that can pinpoint jobs by congressional district and state. But why don't we have one for Canadian constituencies? And why not include TPP and CITA? People understand why trade matters to them. And given our propinquity and innate understanding of the United States, why aren't we turning this to advantage? Ask yourself, how many serious centers for the study of the US are there in Canada? How many Canada research chairs focus on the United States and our trade? You will be disappointed in the answer. I encourage you as parliamentarians to pass CUSMA. I encourage you to press for investments that serve our national interests. In conclusion, we always need to keep in mind that Canada's influence in the world is measured to a large extent by our understanding of the United States. By using our knowledge and relationships with Americans, our ability to leverage influence in Washington and state capitals makes us a more desirable partner with the rest of the world, because they also have to do business with our often complicated neighbor. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robertson. On to Mr. Beliski and Tracy Gorski.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. We are in Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan this morning. We are going to be representing the softwood lumber lack of agreement, as well as Indigenous producers of forest products. We represent the Meadow Lake Tribal Council, located in Northwest Saskatchewan. We're the only major 100% Indigenous-owned softwood lumber producer in Canada. That is Norsaas Forest Products, and we have significant exports to the US. We recognize the current agreement. Of course, softwood lumber is not part of that agreement, but today we are making representation that we cannot be forgotten in this process. We are uniquely important. MLTC's ownership and successful operation of 150 million board-foot sawmill, which is about a medium-sized sawmill in a Canadian context, with annual revenues approximately $60 million, for over 22 years has been a widely heralded benchmark of successful Indigenous forestry and forest product manufacturing in Canada and internationally. Norsaas is a survivor. We weathered the multi-year US housing market collapse in the mid-2000s. It is the only sawmill in Saskatchewan and through much of Canada that did not shut down during the period 2007 to 2012. We are continuing to be impacted by punitive US tariffs. This successful Canadian forestry icon of stable Indigenous economic development continues to be threatened by the effects of ongoing trade tariffs imposed by the US on Canadian softwood lumber, which commenced in December 2017 at a rate of 20.23%. We encourage the federal government to continue support of the Indigenous forest product manufacturing industry in Canada and recognize that the federal government does have a constitutional mandate to protect and enhance the economic well-being of Indigenous peoples. Prime Minister Trudeau has indicated that no relationship is more important to me and to Canada than the one with Indigenous peoples, and it is time for a renewed nation-to-nation relationship based on recognition of rights, respect, cooperation, and partnership. And of course, this should include support of Aboriginal Indigenous ownership of businesses such as Norsaas. The federal government is uniquely responsible. It is the agent responsible for resolving lumber wars and negotiating the deals of managed softwood lumber agreement outcomes on behalf of Canada. The Canada-US lumber trade arena is dominated and influenced by the interest of the largest lumber producers in Canada. And of course, in the last few years, most of these large lumber producers have strategic expanded operations into the US South. Independent Indigenous lumber producers, wholly based in Canada, such as ourselves, end up as collateral damage and significantly disadvantaged in these trade wars. On November 25th, 2016, the U.S. Lumber Coalition filed a petition asking the U.S. Department of Commerce to investigate Canadian softwood lumber shipments with the intent of levying punitive duties and taxes. And in December 2017, this was implemented. The Parliamentary Standing Committee on International Trade in 2016 recognized that in its consultations regarding negotiations around softwood lumber with the United States, that they should include stakeholders that may have been overlooked in the past, especially Aboriginal stakeholders and small producers. It is our view that Indigenous-owned lumber producers and exporters are disproportionately impacted by any trade action related to softwood lumber. Small Indigenous lumber producers require special consideration and protection from this trade action. Briefly, a few statistics on Norsask. We're 100% wholly Indigenous owned. We're located in Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan. The shareholder is the Meadow Lake Tribal Council, representing 9 First Nations with a population of about 13,000 members. It's 30 years of progressive ownership and economic growth in the forestry sector. We produce 150 million board feet of lumber each year of premium softwood lumber. 70% of this is exported to well-established customers in the Midwest US. Our fiber source is fully certified to the highest standards in Canada and internationally, including the Forest Stewardship Council. We are a globally recognized model of sustainable Indigenous-owned forestry enterprise. I would like to say a few words on employment. Indigenous employment in Saskatchewan in the forestry sector is the highest in Canada at 30%. And in Northwest Saskatchewan, the percentage is 65%. And this is a tremendous contribution to the local economy. We may be small in a Canadian context, but we are very significant regionally. And in terms of a model of good outcomes, in terms of Indigenous forestry, we're the high point in the Canadian landscape. A quote from Shane Vermette, our Executive Director in Saskatchewan of the Ministry of Energy and Resources, is that Saskatchewan leads Canada and MLTC leads Saskatchewan by far when it comes to Indigenous forestry business development, Indigenous employment in the forestry sector, and the percent of annual allowable cut allocated to Indigenous businesses. Again, our markets are into the U.S. Midwest. We are landlocked. We have very limited opportunity to get offshore. So the U.S. market is critical for us. And again, we reiterate the need for a managed outcome to the current trade dispute. Some of the issues I'd like to highlight are that the current U.S. trade action has been miserable for Indigenous lumber producers. Despite weathering prior softwood lumber wars, and in particular the housing crash, the current softwood lumber trade action by the U.S. and imposed tariff regime has produced significant hardship for Norsask forest products. Norsask has made deposits related to these countervail and anti-dumping duties of approximately $11 million in the last 3 years. And it is our desire that these funds be returned in their entirety to the Meadow Lake Tribal Council as soon as possible. Our mid-continent location limits access to offshore markets. Saskatchewan is far from the Asian markets, and we cannot compete with the Alberta and BC lumber producers with respect to these markets. Norsask needs ongoing unfettered access to its U.S. lumber customer base in order to maintain operations. The other issue is that the small volume of lumber exported to the U.S. from Indigenous-owned lumber manufacturing facilities in Canada is clearly not a threat to the U.S. lumber producers and is not the cause of the current softwood lumber dispute. Indigenous lumber producers cannot be collateral damage in a dispute aimed at the larger producers in Canada, who incidentally have also managed to mitigate their situation by purchasing sawmills in the U.S. South. Indigenous lumber producers generally are standalone enterprises that lack geographic diversity, business diversification into pulp, paper, and other products, and market options enjoyed by our larger competitor peers. Norsask, as an example of sustained, successful outcome of Indigenous business development in the forestry sector, has required decades of thoughtful nurture and incubation, and this successful investment in economic development cannot be lost due to these trade actions. For example, Norsask represents 0.5% of Canada's lumber exports to the US. We're clearly no harm or threat, and yet we're included in the same bucket as the rest of the producers. A solution to this would be that in future arrangements with the US, that Indigenous lumber producers are exempt from tariffs, duties, and quota limitations. Special measures that we ask is that, number one, the federal government ensure that wholly Indigenous lumber producers receive 100% of their tariff deposits back as soon as possible, which in our case is $11 million. These funds are used, any profits generated from the operations go directly back to the 9 First Nations and used for housing and other underfunded aspects of their programming. We ask also that the federal government provide accommodation to wholly owned Indigenous lumber manufacturing facilities in Canada that export to the US, such that they be excluded or not subject to duties, tariffs, or quotas under any trade action or future softwood lumber agreements. And lastly, that the federal government continue to provide mechanisms for financial support to assist Indigenous-owned lumber producers, and that they survive these lost revenues and caused by these unfair trade actions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. And on to Mr. Valencourt.
Bonjour.
Hello, the Réseau québécois sur l'intégration continentale is pleased for this opportunity to present our point of view on the U.S.-Canada-Mexico trade agreement. The RQIC is represented today by myself, Claude Vaillancourt, President of ATTAC Québec, and Normand Pépin, Union Advisor, Research CSD. The Réseau exists since 1985, but adopted its current name in 1994. It is defined as a large multi-sectorial coalition grouping together social organizations in Quebec from different settings: union, community, international development. The member organizations of the RQIC represent over 1 million people. The RQIC has as a goal to suggest a vision for development respecting social rights, workers' rights, and human rights, and to promote democracy, participation, respect of the environment, and poverty eradication.
À propos de la CIUM-ORQ,
we are pleased to see the removal for Canada of the chapter on foreign investment protection, Chapter 11, because it afforded businesses the right to sue states for government measures that could reduce their profits, even if these measures seek to protect populations and the environment. We are disappointed of the attitude of the Canadian government in negotiations. The removal of Chapter 11 was a requirement of the Trump administration. Canada waited until the last minute to keep this chapter. This chapter was a threat to state sovereignty. A strange attitude for a country that was brought before the courts the most. 41 court actions on 85 within the framework of NAFTA, and governments had to change their actions for fear of being brought before the courts, because the deleterious effects of this chapter cannot be calculated in millions of dollars to be paid in case of a guilty verdict. It is calculated also in a regulatory chill when governments do not try to improve conditions for their populations. We are also pleased of the removal of energy proportionality clause. This forced Canada to hardly ever reduce oil exports to the U.S. This also limited our energy sovereignty, an unenviable situation for any country. The RQIC is very pleased this time not of an abolition of the maintenance of the general exclusion for cultural products. Cultural products will not be considered as products such as others in CUSMA and will allow Canada to implement measures necessary to protect our artists and their productions. Now, on the issues of the environment and labor, we have important differences of opinion with Minister Freeland. If we recognize that it was essential for these two subjects to have their place in the agreement as full chapter rather than being dealt with in parallel agreements without mechanisms for the rules of application, we need more than that before saying this is the most progressive agreement ever. Minister Freeland stated here a few days ago that CUSMA required of signing parties that they maintain high levels of protection of the environment and environmental governance. We note that CUSMA has no adequate measures to combat climate change. Chapter 24 on the environment contains a few good intentions, but is insufficient and completely ill-suited to respond to this urgent climate situation in which we find ourselves. The words climate change, warming, emergency are absent from this chapter. The Paris Agreement is not mentioned. There are no targets and no measures against large emitters. CUSMA continues to promote a type of economy based on mass exportation, long circuits. This encourages the transportation of merchandise and high consumption of fossil fuels. No measures allow to encourage an energy shift that we need. On the contrary, this will require new regulations going against the immediate interest of some large emitters. Chapter 28 on best regulatory practices, and we'll come back to this, will have a dissuasive effect which will impose huge constraints on governments trying to adopt regulations to protect the environment and allow a shift to a greener energy. As to the labor market, Chapter 23 on this theme is incomplete. There are a few good intentions, and they are laudable. For example, forced labor, violence against workers, immigrant labor, discrimination in the workplace. The application of these measures seems quite problematic. 2 days ago, Minister Freeland stated that the new NAFTA imposed ambitious and enforceable requirements against discrimination, included gender discrimination. The first text made public on October the 1st, 2018 stipulated each party should implement policies protecting workers against discrimination with regards to gender. In the last text, each party implements policies that they consider to be appropriate to protect workers. So we've gone again policies that protect workers to policies that are appropriate with regards to gender-based discrimination. This protection is now left to the good judgment of each party. Even worse, Canada accepted that the U.S. Watered down current policies of their federal agencies. With regards to violence against workers, it's mentioned that this should have an effect on trade or investment between the parties. It seems difficult to demonstrate, very limiting, as is all of the chapter. CUSMA doesn't solve the issue of competition between workers. It doesn't advance any concrete measures to improve workers' conditions. Only the automobile sector contains targets, a salary rate of at least $16 US per hour. This is an arbitrary and insufficient choice. Now, let's come to the new Chapter 28 of CUSMA. On best regulatory practices, this chapter was totally absent from NAFTA, and Minister Freeland didn't even speak to this last Tuesday. If we highlight the victory that was the removal of Chapter 11 of NAFTA, we have to temper our enthusiasm given the existence of Chapter 28. The title of the chapter is deceiving because the practices are not as they appear to be. According to the rules of CUSMA, the parties have to make public each year a list of regulations that they want to implement the following year, and to impose the obligation of justifying the need for new regulation and to make public all scientific studies and data used. That's not all. If the parties decide to conduct an impact assessment of new regulations, this is strongly recommended. There should be an explanation of the requirement for the new requirement, and the problem it's supposed to solve a list of all the other regulatory and non-regulatory solutions that could be used to try to solve the problem, a cost-benefit analysis of each of the alternative scenarios and the reasons why it would be preferable to opt for the proposed solution. That's not the worst. Article 28.13 requires of the parties that they create and maintain procedures or mechanisms allowing to conduct retrospective reviews of regulations to determine if they should be modified or repealed. Article 28.14 imposes on all parties to submit written suggestions to all organizations with regards to the adoption, modification, or repeal of a regulation. This opens the door wide for large business lobbyists to try to directly influence people in charge of ensuring that regulation is followed. So this is deregulation that is being targeted by this chapter on regulation, and not a regulation that could contribute to the protection of the environment or populations. It's so complicated to try to improve regulations or to create new ones that the only change will be the one of deregulation. In this framework, you don't no more need to be able to bring the governments to court, because this will be even more efficient. We are quite surprised that a Liberal government supports this type of disposition, this type of requirement. Thank you very much.
Much on to our members' questioning. Mr. Fast.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses for appearing before us to discuss what is arguably the most important economic agreement Canada has with any country around the world, the United States being by far our largest trading partner. So it's important that we get this right. Mr. Vanderpool, thank you for attending and for sharing some of your concerns about the caps that are being placed on the export of value-added milk products, milk protein concentrates and isolates. Is it fair to say that your company is one of the world leaders in terms of developing innovative new products for which there's a huge market in the global marketplace?
Yes, we're one of about a half a dozen companies around the world, the only one in Canada and certainly and in North America that produce the types of high-quality dairy ingredients that we currently produce.
Okay, did our Foreign Affairs Minister or any of her negotiators ever consult with you directly on the caps that they ended up including in the new NAFTA?
No, and in fact, I'm vice chair of the Dairy Processors Association of Canada, and we met with the minister 2 weeks prior to the first release of the text, and we were assured at that time that caps would not be included in the agreement.
So you're saying that you were misled about these caps?
Well, we were told they would not be included.
And they are included?
They are included.
Okay, could you tell us a little bit more about the impact these caps will have on your ability to export to markets around the world? It's one thing to impose caps on exports to our trading partner in the United States, but I'm not aware of any free trade agreement where Canada has actually agreed to cap its exports to markets beyond the trading partner that we're negotiating with.
Well, that's our understanding as well. It's unprecedented that the United States would dictate what trade we do around the world between an agreement like this. But what it really does for Canada is it really restricts the ability to continue to grow our market and supply our domestic markets, first of all, with the products that they need. Typically, as I mentioned, the solids non-fat are excess. And so we need to export those. Historically, we've been exporting around 70,000 metric tons. When the caps come into place, year one will be reduced to 55,000 tons, and then year two and thereafter 35,000 tons. So basically, from current levels, the caps would reduce our exports in half, which is really devastating for the industry and the ability to grow going forward.
Has anyone in the minister's office justified why they would have done this to effectively kneecap the industry that you play in?
The only response they've given us is that the alternatives were a lot worse. We were not aware of what those alternatives were, but we were told they were be worse than the caps.
Really? You have proposed that CUSMA not come into force until August 1st, 2020, correct?
That's correct.
Could you explain a little bit more how this would mitigate some of the impacts of these caps?
So the implications for dairy come into effect 3 months after ratification of CUSMA. So if it comes in after May 1st, that would be August 1st. The caps are based on a dairy year, which run from August 1st through to July 31st. So if CUSMA is ratified before that date, as I mentioned, year one, the restriction is 55,000 tons. That would in fact be in effect already now. If it is not implemented and come into force until August 1st, at least we have from August 1st to July 31st, 2021, to be able to utilize the 55,000 tons. Otherwise, effective August 1st, we immediately go to a 35,000 ton restriction.
So the fix you're proposing is just a short-term fix. The long-term problem will remain, correct?
That is correct.
All right. You've shared with me that you had some very ambitious plans to expand your company's reach around the world. You have operations not only on the West Coast, but also in Winnipeg, correct?
Correct.
How will this cap impact your willingness to invest in your company and to expand your product lines?
Significantly. We need assurances, first of all, that we receive the compensation that has been promised to us as processors to be able to invest into the required infrastructure that we need to produce products that are not subject to the caps. Secondly, it takes some time to develop, continue to develop those value-added markets. Those are the right markets for Canada for the long term, but they take a significant investment in capital and time in order to achieve those markets.
Okay, I'm going to go to Mr. Robertson. Welcome, Colin. You and I have known each other for a long time. You made a statement, curious. You said this was the best agreement under the circumstances. Under the circumstances they sound like weasel words. Essentially, we didn't get a better deal. We didn't get a win-win. We got the best we could under a Donald Trump. Is that what you were implying with those words?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I think that
Thank you for your honesty.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Dhaliwal.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome all the presenters here. My first question is going to Mr. Vanderpool from beautiful British Columbia. You mentioned all the issues that you will be facing with the CUSMA, but you slightly mentioned that that you need a tangible support from the government in these circumstances. Could you please elaborate what kind of support would you like to see government provide you in the future years?
Thank you. Well, first of all, as I mentioned, we would like the implementation of CUSMA to take effect until August 1st.
Right,
So that's the first request. Second request is, as dairy processors, we have been promised compensation based on the previous trade agreements and CUSMA. We are still waiting that. The dairy producers have been promised and have been granted funding. We have not yet, so we're still waiting for that, even though it's been promised. That will help us invest into making products that will not be subject to the caps. Thirdly, we would like to continue to have support of the government to defend our industry from further erosion and restrictions based on possible future trade deals.
Okay. Thank you. And my next question is going to Mr. Vaillancourt. Well, Mr. Vaillancourt, as far as I understand that by modernizing this this agreement, it preserves Canada's cultural exemption, which will give Canada flexibility to adopt and maintain programs and policy that support sport, and almost 660,000 Canadian jobs in the cultural industry, which is going to help Quebec and rest of Canada. Do you agree with that?
Oui, oui, tout à fait. Oui, c'est quelque chose qu'on trouve qui est très
Yes, we find that this is very positive, the overall protection of culture, including internet. And so this is very good. But next, there has to be a follow-up, and the follow-up should be that the Canadian government should take measures to promote Quebec and Canadian artists. Because now we have a tool, so we need to use this tool to promote culture.
Thank you. And my next question is to Canadian Global Affairs. It is my understanding that you had a conference discussing aspects of CUSMA with range of experts from diplomats and consultants.
Yes, we have an annual trade conference there.
Okay, what were the key messages from that conference about this deal?
Well, the conference was held while the negotiations were still taking place. We've had two, and in each case, we discussed various aspects of the agreement and what Canada should be seeking, and we had participation from the current trade team, including people like Steve Verhoeven.
And are you satisfied, that most of those discussions are implemented in this agreement?
Yes, sir. I think that trade negotiations are a give and take, and again, the circumstances, as I was trying to in response to Mr. Fast, the United States came in, as Mr. Ross, the Commerce Secretary, put it quite succinctly. This was for Canada and Mexico to give and the United States to get. And I think we did extremely well under the circumstances. We preserved that access, which is vital, as been pointed out by other witnesses, to the U.S. market. So, and we were able to add new chapters on labor and the environment. Again, it's not a perfect agreement. And I would just also point out that we shouldn't expect a trade agreement to be the be-all and end-all for anything. We have, after all, the Paris Climate Accords, which I think are the appropriate vehicle to deal with climate. We have the International Labor Organization measures, which we abide by. Trade agreements should not be seen as the kind of catch-all for everything, because then they sink.
My next question goes to NORSEC. It is my understanding that throughout the negotiations, one of Canada's objectives for new NAFTA was to better reflect the interests of Indigenous peoples. And it's my understanding that Canada was able to secure that. Do you agree with that? Or are you aware of that?
Yes, I have to admit we're not experts in the international trade negotiations, but it's our personal experience within the softwood lumber dispute that we would like to see a little more provision in there around protecting Indigenous business interests across the entire spectrum of industry in Canada. And we, as a standalone operation in Canada, are very negatively impacted. Of course, it impacts our ability to reinvest and continue this good story in Saskatchewan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Dhaliwal, on to Mr. Savard-Tremblay.
Alors merci à l'ensemble des...
Thank you to all the witnesses for today. It was very interesting to hear what the producer's reality is, and also to hear people from the softwood lumber sector. This confirms a lot of concerns that we had on our side. As a representative for the Bloc Québécois, I am going to speak to our representatives from Quebec. I'm very pleased because you're the Quebec network, and I've already been involved with your group, so it's a pleasure to see you here today. So when you spoke to Chapter 28 or Section 28 on good regulatory practices, you seem to say that this tempers the scope of the beneficial effects of the former Section 11 of NAFTA.
Maintenant, selon vous, est-ce qu'on change 4 ans?
So is it half a dozen of one, or is this a relative progress? So I imagine that time will tell, but as you said, the minister didn't speak to this. I questioned the negotiator for Canada, he told us that there was no issue with regards to sovereignty. In the end, this was in the spirit of reciprocity to try to not be had by the Americans. So can you give a certain value to this? Well, not really, no. We have governments that are there to make political decisions. And so we're not going to question that. But what's behind this chapter is that state action is suspicious from the onset. If a minister wakes up in the morning, decides to impose a regulation that is nonsensical, well, that life doesn't work like this. And with all the criteria that have to be met to be able to implement a new regulation or even improve an existing regulation, well, this is going to discourage governments from acting at all. Whether it be the US or the Canadian or the Mexican government, it's the same. But aren't there, well, yes, what I would like to add is that if you're saying it's half a dozen of one, or I mean, everything is happening behind closed doors. We don't really know how this is going to shake out. And this might, you could block a regulation even before it starts. So that's a problem, is when regulation in the public interest is what is important to us. And we find this concerning with this a particular chapter. We didn't speak to it enough. And so this might have the strongest consequences within this new agreement. So you don't really see a way of tempering unfair competition. You think everything should be clear from the beginning, from the onset. You don't think a party will? No. For us, this is a chapter that will contribute to deregulation. With the issue of climate change, with social inequalities, we need regulations that are stronger and always in the interest of the population. We speak a lot about harmonization, standardization. We agree with that. It has to be done, but by raising the bar, not by lowering the bar. So this brings me to the issue of the environment, and you were saying that it's very insufficient that we don't mention the Paris Accord. As you know, the U.S. did not sign the Paris Accord, so it would have been surprising to mention the Paris Accord in CUSMA. And is there something else, any other mechanisms that would allow for is there something else to add teeth? No, there are no teeth. Global warming is an environmental issue. It's not mentioned in the agreement. We believe that that's a huge problem. Also, Chapter 28 can be used in the sense that we saw that in Chapter 11, most of the court actions were against regulations on environmental issues. We are afraid that this will continue, but through this new chapter, using this new chapter. Do I have any time? 1 minute. Okay. Now, people representing the softwood lumber industry, can they hear me? I know that earlier there were technical problems and I lost a part of the presentation. The interpreters were not able to hear the sound. Are the technical issues solved? Can you hear? Okay, let's try. Oh, they can hear us. Okay. As you know, in Quebec, we have a distinct regime with regards to the softwood lumber conflict, and we say that it's an auction system that allows for the price to be set. Do you think that this distinct system should be recognized in the agreements? Because this one would save us the lawsuits, the different punitive tariffs that have been implemented over the years.
Ils nous entendent pas. Ils nous entendent? Ouais. C'est le délai.
Yes. So just a brief commentary. Jurisdiction on Crown Forest lands across Canada, of course, differ between the provinces. And so there's everything from fee simple through to Western Canada, where it's the province, of course, owns the Crown Forest lands. So there's a full range of outcomes, and each jurisdiction has been very effective in trying to negotiate their own outcome provincially. Unfortunately, the U.S. doesn't take that approach. They see Canada as a whole, and of course, injustice prevails, and these crippling duties continue to be a part of our landscape.
Thank you
So
very much.
we
Thank you very much, sir. Sorry that I have to cut you off. On to Mr. Blakey.
Thank you very much, and I'd actually just like to take up some questions with our visitors from Saskatchewan. First of all, I just want to say, thank you for proposing some kind of concrete solutions in terms of what governments might seek to put into trade agreements to help Indigenous businesses prosper. But I wanted to take a step back. I mean, one of the things that the NDP has said about this agreement is that it ought to have recognized the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And I think what we have felt is that it's important that a trade agreement not be able to trump Canada's relationship with Indigenous peoples, whether it's it's something that's in the Constitution. Treaty documents are fundamental to Canada. We already have existing international commitments and international agreements like UNDRIP. And our point is that you can't just kind of go off and sign a trade agreement that then is going to take precedence over all those important factors. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts or reflections on that, or if you've done some thinking about how ensuring that those fundamental aspects of Canada and its relationship to Indigenous people are protected in trade agreements.
Well, certainly we would completely endorse that point of view. There is this special relationship, and anything that acts as a deterrent or keeps constraint on any kind of affirmative action within Canada is a negative outcome. So we certainly endorse that and would encourage anything that would allow for this free, unfettered approach to Canada's approach with Indigenous peoples.
Thank you very much. Au Réseau québécois sur l'intégration continentale, je veux vous remercier.
Thank you very much for your words on Chapter 28. I'd like to ask you, if we talk to the precautionary principle, if we talk about a philosophical bias that could be found with regards to these types of arrangements or international trade agreements, how can we integrate the precautionary principle in a trade agreement in order to ensure that we can use this principle when public policy is being formulated? Well, I think that Chapter 28, as it is written, hinders the precautionary principle from being used. So it's an important issue in negotiation between Canada and the EU. Canada wants to preserve this principle, but on the chapter on regulatory cooperation, there's a vulnerability. It appears that this is very essential to protect the health of the population, the environment, so the precautionary principle is something that is being threatened. Yes, but the Europeans are demonstrating that it is possible to have a trade agreement that does include the precautionary principle. Yes, exactly. So this is not something that will make it impossible to have trade or impossible to... No, it's not an obstacle to trade at all. On the contrary, I believe that it's a trade that is at the service of the population, that takes into account other issues other than profits. Of course, profit is important, but it does ensure that the health and safety of the population are fundamental. Oftentimes, the damages that are incurred, if we don't apply the precautionary principle, are damages that are irreversible. Then it's too late to come back. So it's the spirit of the precautionary principle. It is fundamental. It's fundamental, and Canada shouldn't fight against this, should support it. We know that through in Europe, they're fighting against this. So we can see in Chapter 28, there is a philosophical bias that has nothing to do with the trade, really. It's more has to do with specific interests of certain corporations or some governments. Yes, that I agree with your analysis. Thank you.
Ask Mr. Robertson. I just wanted to touch a little bit more on Buy America and the importance of procurement. I know you mentioned some of the ways that Canada might consider trying to make up for what's not in this agreement in terms of access to procurement. I know that I've got New Flyer Industries in my riding who produce a lot of buses and sell most of them into the United States, and Buy America has affected jobs in Winnipeg because of the content requirements. I was surprised recently there was a meeting of governors and Canadian premiers. Premier Pallister from Manitoba didn't send anybody on his behalf, but it seems to me that actually that province to state relationship is going to be important for businesses that export to the US in terms of keeping jobs here in Canada. Could you speak to that a little bit more?
Yes, sir. I think you're correct. I think that premiers and governors, because they're the level where usually the spending takes place, particularly when it comes to major infrastructure, is they want best value, and best value often comes from having a variety of vendors, not just in your state or province, and having an outside competition which has equal access will often prevent cartels in your own province or state, and therefore you get far better value for public money. And this was really the philosophy that was behind what I was at the embassy, and we were trying to get a procurement agreement at the national level. It wasn't working. We've since have one through the World Trade Organization, but when the United States was in the Obama administration was doing their big build as part of the post-recession effort to recover, we wanted access to, as you would put it, a New Flyer and others, so we could sell buses and things into the United States. And we found that the best way to do it were the premiers going down, meeting with governors who could, both of them saw advantage, both of them who were charged with spending monies that came from federal government.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robertson. Sorry to be cutting you off. You're giving us valuable information, but there's only so much time. Mr. Vidal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to thank all the witnesses today for taking the time to both prepare and come and present today. I know that's a big commitment for many of you. I also want to thank my colleagues for allowing me to participate in this process today, as obviously this is not my committee, but it's a privilege to participate today. I want to particularly thank Mr. Beliski and Ms. Gorski for being willing to be here today, as you represent people from my riding and people from my community. My question for either Mr. Beliski or Ms. Gorski is, you spoke quite eloquently about the Indigenous ownership and the impact it has on the communities affected by the softwood lumber or a lack of a softwood lumber agreement and the tariffs. I would like you to expand on the 9 ownership First Nations and what that $11 million in money that's tied up in tariffs since 2017, the impact that might have on the 13,000 people represented by those 9 First Nations.
Good morning. Look, this is about nation building. And as the Honourable Member Blakey pointed out, this is about building Canada, and there should be no group left behind in this. And there's a special group within Canada, the Indigenous community, that is working very hard and very diligently to create economy, be part of provincial economies. And trade action around softwood lumber just puts a big wet blanket on all of this. So the impact to the communities are significant. As the big players in the industry generate profits, so do we as we can, and those go directly back to the 9 communities that make up the Tribal Council. The impact of these crippling duties is significant, and $11 million represents $11 million that doesn't go back into education, into healthcare. Saskatchewan has unfortunately been in the news nationally around suicide. Suicide prevention is a big matter. Infrastructure development, housing is always critically funded, and huge demand on that front. So the demands and the needs are many, and non-program funding and self-generated funds are critically important to First Nations across Canada, and particularly in the Meadow Lake area with the Meadow Lake Tribal Council. Generating these funds and getting them back to the communities annually is just a significant part of what we do at Norsask. This is part business and part mission, and we need to have special protection around these measures.
Thank you. I also had the privilege of touring your facility in Meadow Lake not that long ago. And I was very impressed with the investments you've made in technology and in capital upgrades to that mill to keep you competitive. I know there's many sawmills around our country that are closing because of their inability to be competitive. I think the softwood or the lack of a softwood lumber agreement is significant. A significant impact on that, but I would like you to speak as well maybe to what the impact this lack of agreement might have on your ability to reinvest in technology and in capital that allows you to remain competitive and to weather the storms you have for so many years.
Clearly, Norsaask is a survivor, and we've weathered a whole lot of bad outcomes over the last 2 decades. Very important to us is our ability to stay capitalized, and any kind of trade action where we have tariffs take money out of our system. So our ability to actually look to the future and invest in a proactive and positive manner is compromised when we're paying these tariffs. We have to keep up with the changing technology and staying in the game, and that involves technology enhancements. So we are very best to make sure we have reinvestment going back into the mill that keeps us as on par with our competitors, and keeps us as a viable part of the Meadow Lake community and as a contributing part of the economy of the Meadow Lake Tribal Council First Nations.
Thank you. We've talked lots about the impact on the Indigenous community in Northwest Saskatchewan, but you just briefly referenced it in your last response. I would like you to also just maybe comment on the impact you have on Meadow Lake and the surrounding community. I mean, Meadow Lake is very much a partner in that Northwest Saskatchewan with Indigenous communities, but there's a great impact on the small city of Meadow Lake and the surrounding rural municipalities as well.
Very true. We are a forestry dependent community. Forestry is a major contributor to the Meadow Lake economy. Our particular facility contributes 100 direct jobs in the local community. Of course, 65% of those are Indigenous. A wonderful representation of the community. Beyond that is the woodland support. There's truckers, there's harvesters, there's various suppliers. The multiplier effect in forestry is far larger than many other industries.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for your answer. On to Ms. Bedayan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Merci à vous tous d'être parmi nous.
Thank you for being with us today. My question is for Mr. Vaillancourt and Mr. Pepin. And I'm very pleased to have witnesses from Quebec. You spoke to the cultural exception in the agreement. You also said the agreement protects and modernizes the cultural exception. And as you perhaps know, there was pressure, intense pressure on the minister and our negotiators to get rid of it or to strongly weaken this. But we maintained it. The cultural exception protects our artists, as you mentioned, and preserves our Canadian content. And as an MP from Montreal, I'm very proud that our government was able to maintain this exception to protect our Quebec culture. As you know, digital content will also benefit from this same protection. I would like to follow up to a suggestion that you spoke to earlier in your testimony. Do you have any ideas of concrete actions that could be taken to use the cultural exception to promote our artists, our Quebec artists, and our Francophone content? Yes. Well, first of all, there's the issue of recommendations that are made on the web giants' sites. The Canadian and Quebec products are not visible, so we need more visibility. And also, I think that we need to continue to fund culture. And if we're a small market, well, this cultural exemption does allow us to have more funding for artists. This is something that could maintain the dynamic nature of the Quebec cultural industry. It's already exceptional. We could do more. And I think that as a third proposal, we would need more participation of large businesses that are benefiting from our market, a market that is consuming the products, but they pay very little tax. And so I think this would be the best contribution that they could make. We need tax measures, very firm tax measures in this fashion. Thank you. Do you have anything else to add, Mr. Pepin? No, that's fine. He's a specialist. Thank you.
For Mr. Robinson from the Canadian Global Affairs Institute, thank you very much for your testimony earlier. And in response to a question from my colleague, the Honourable Ed Fast, with respect to your statement, and I believe it was this is the best agreement possible under the circumstances. I would ask as a follow-up, in your opinion and having reviewed the agreement in its entirety, would you agree that it is a better agreement overall for Canada than the original NAFTA?
I think that grosso modo, it updates the original NAFTA, which was absolutely necessary. There are parts of it which are managed trade, as we talked about autos. There are pieces that we would have liked, a procurement chapter, for example, but it wasn't going to work. But I think given the circumstances, it is the best possible agreement we could have negotiated under the circumstances, and that we are much further ahead with it because we now, it's a kind of crown jewel. We have the CITA, we have the CPTP, but the critical agreement for us is always access to the United States. And now we have that security under a very difficult and sometimes complicated administration.
Thank you very much for that very political answer. I would also ask, you did mention the lack of perhaps statistics or estimate of the number of jobs that rely on trade with the United States in Canada, but there are some statistics, particularly I'm thinking of the percentage that our country does exports with the United States. I'm sure, I wonder if you could speak to that.
Sure, yes, we do have statistics, but I think that we need, and I think you as members of parliament, when you speak to your constituents, should be able to say, look, your jobs, and again, we hear from Middle Lake, we know the importance of trade, but people want to know specifically what it means. We can do this now down to the legislative, really the constituency level in the United States. We have the capacity to do it in Canada, and I think we should, because I think all members of parliament should have access to those figures, and I would include in it the importance of the European market and the Asian market, because we, more than most countries, I point out that we're, I think, the 12th largest export country. Most people don't realize how important trade is to our prosperity. That's what pays for our healthcare, our education. So I think you as members of parliament could be better equipped if we could get the statistics and make them available. And it is readily available because we have the tools to do it with other countries.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Carey.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I'll be splitting my time with Mr. Cram. But just to follow up with Mr. Robertson there, we've actually been asking for the economic impact studies. The Americans, as you know, last April put out their economic impact studies. The minister was here saying, well, she couldn't do it, but I think nobody around the table or in Canada believes she would sign on to an agreement of this importance without having some advice on how this is going to impact Canada economically. Mr. Pepin, I think, brought up the issue that's so important that we have these numbers. And Mr. Vanderpoel, with your industry, I can't believe we had a witness yesterday, Mr. Geist, who is an expert in the IP side of things. He wasn't consulted, you weren't consulted, and it's getting frustrating at this level that the minister obviously has this advice and she's not releasing it. And I would just ask, I suppose maybe I don't have a lot of time, Mr. Vanderpoel, how important is it to you that you have these economic impact numbers as families make business decisions moving forward, the sector makes these business decisions, and do you have any economic impact studies you could share with committee? Because we've been asking the minister over and over since December 12th to release the studies and the advice. If they don't have a full study, just the advice that they've been given, so that we can actually make sure that the support and programs are available for these families that are going to be negatively affected. Do you have anything you could give us?
Well, thank you for that question. As an industry, we do have some studies, and we have quantified it by the effects on dollars and jobs. That has been shared with the minister and the staff.
Could you let the committee have that, please? Because we're at such a tight timeline here, and we all want to make sure for certainty that we have this in place, as Mr. Robertson was saying, but we need to have that information. And the minister has not been cooperative. It's almost like some people are saying it's to a point where, you know, what is she hiding, right? And we don't have that. Could you share that with us, please?
Yes, we, as on behalf of the Dairy Processors Association of Canada, we can share those studies with you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cramp.
Okay, thank you.
Finally.
Well, thank you to Mr. Beliski and Ms. Gorski for joining us today from Meadow Lake and for sharing your success story of the Meadow Lake Tribal Council and North Sask Forest Products. I was wondering if you could provide some insight as to what you would like to see in future trade agreements that will help create employment opportunities for Indigenous persons in rural and remote parts of the country.
Well, that's a great question. I mean, everything that we can do on that front would be very positive. Just very specifically about softwood lumber, what happens is the big broad brush that gets applied to the Canadian landscape, and the federal government needs to make sure there's a more finely tuned approach taken in response. And as we've been able to indicate with some of our charts, the Indigenous contribution to the softwood lumber issue is non-existent, and it's critical that we get special protection and based on some good rationale, and this be presented in a very cogent manner to the U.S. and making sure that Canada stands up for the Indigenous community when it comes to any sector across Canada. It takes so much effort and goodwill to make these things happen, and it takes stability. And with these ups and downs in trade wars and so forth, changing agreements, critical that we have that stability built into the system.
And you mentioned that because northern Saskatchewan is landlocked, that there is little opportunity for you to export offshore. Is there anything that can be done with improved infrastructure, such as rail or highways, that would be beneficial to you in getting your products to international markets?
Hi, thank you for that question. I'll try to answer that. Our rail line was abandoned many, many years ago here in Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan. We did have a rail line that served this community for many years under the CN, and then it was sold over to Omnitracks, which was Carleton Trail Railway. There's three big manufacturers in Meadow Lake, one being the pulp mill, OSB manufacturer, and then ourselves. At that time, we all used the rail line to logistically get our products to market. At this time, we do not have the capacity. So now, with the rail line abandoned, all of our equipment goes by trucks. So when you're looking to hit the offshore markets, let's say, going trucking from Meadow Lake to BC and then loading and getting over to the Asian market, it's very, very costly. And because we're one of one sawmill, we are limited in regards to being competitive.
Thank you very much.
So our market per se may not be as big as, let's say, a BC or an Alberta producer.
Okay, thank you very much. On to Mr. Badaway.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I do appreciate, Madam Chair, the opportunity to sit on this committee today. As many know, I do chair the Standing Committee on Transportation, Infrastructure, and Communities, and the reason being here today is because of the crossover on this issue and all the trade issues have with both committees. So it's a pleasure to be here and bring some of the thoughts forward on behalf of that committee. First off, Madam Chair, I do want to state and preface my comments by stating that I do anticipate the passing of CUSMA, which will in fact align with CITA and of course CPTPP, and that's what I'm going to premise my comments on today with the witnesses that we have before us. There was mention earlier about the $1 trillion program procurement that we must embark on by Mr. Robertson. In fact, if Canada needs to invest in infrastructure, strategic infrastructure investments to overall strengthen our international trade performance, it's imminent that we begin to work with our different committees here in Parliament, but more importantly, with our partners, both in the public sector, municipal in particular, as well as the private sector. I will be bringing forward a few motions today to the committee that will align with some of that direction. A study on focusing on current and anticipated labor shortages throughout the country, in particular as it relates to the transportation sector. Undertaking a study on Canada's rural digital infrastructure, prospective solutions to the gaps in wireless infrastructure deployment throughout rural Canada. Looking at the gas tax, and of course the need to work with, once again, our municipal and our private sector partners, as well as our Indigenous communities, to put in place strategic investments that once again align with our trade agreements such as CUSMA, CITA, and CPTPP. So I do want to ask the question primarily to Mr. Robertson of the Canadian Global Affairs Institute with respect to your comment on the $1 trillion program, the procurement program. And I'll throw a question there for you because I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to allow you to comment on what I just talked about and the importance of same. And I'll throw one in there with how important is it for us as a nation, Canada, to work binationally with establishing our procurement and, of course, the strategic infrastructure investments that will align, complement the trade agreements that we have in place.
Well, so I think it's vitally important because we when we export, we're not exactly sure which port it's going to go to. Some of the people in Saskatchewan know sometimes it goes through the United States and out through Portland and Seattle, whereas American goods sometimes will come up to Canada. So integrating the infrastructure, as I said in my remarks, is vital, especially as the United States appears to be probably the next administration, whether Democrat or Republican, working with Congress, is prepared to put really big money. I mentioned $1 trillion. In fact, it could come to a couple of $1 trillion. We need to be a piece of that, both access to it in terms of procurement, but also in linking up rail, road, air. Again, it's that North American capacity we have to become the truly competitive platform for the world. We've now got the pieces in place, but we need the infrastructure. So I would applaud what you and your committee are doing and your suggestions of how we move forward, and encourage you to talk with your American counterparts, because really what will make this happen is legislator talking to legislator.
If I may, Madam Chair, and I think that discussion has to continue, not only between standing committees here in Parliament, but also across border. And I would be very interested, once again, to move the yardsticks down the field to get ourselves to that goal line. What your and many of the witness thoughts are on those issues and what those strategic investments should be. So I'll ask a question with respect to, as you mentioned, rail, road, air, and water. And of course, in my riding in Niagara, we have the Great Lakes, which is binational. And we all recognize that with the trade that's going to be coming in and out of the Midwest, a lot of it's going to be, especially going over to the EU and other diversified areas versus just the United States. We're recognizing that the Great Lakes and, of course, the St. Lawrence Seaway and the Welland Canal will be used a lot. So my question is, what investments do you see with respect to binational investments, infrastructure investments, do you see between the rail, the water, the air, and the road, between both Canada and the U.S., as well as international?
Well, sir, I'd refer
Mr.
you
Robertson,
to
to have a
NASCO.
short answer. My apologies, just a short answer. You've got 20 seconds remaining.
Okay, I just say NASCO, which is a tri-country, has come up with a whole series of excellent recommendations, which I'd refer to your committee.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Savard-Tremblay for 2 minutes.
Well, 2 minutes. Okay, 2 minutes. How can I say something intelligent in 2 minutes? When I was teaching, 3 hours wasn't enough sometimes. So I'd like to come back to the Réseau Québécois. Mr. Pépin, you spoke about the work that was mentioned with regards to the auto sector. And you said that there were, and I'm summarizing here what you had to say. Yes, well, that's right. There are protections for the auto sector. There are intentions of protecting against a workplace discrimination. This has been diluted at the last minute. When you speak about work, you also speak to industry. What do you think about the rules of origin in the agreement? If you looked over this, well, There's the rules of origin, but there's also the issue with the aluminum sector that you raised. They don't have the same protection as steel, regardless of what the government is saying. And so parts, the aluminum smelting is not being protected. If the part has been, if it passes the test and for North America, well, it's very insufficient to protect jobs and future investments in this industry, especially in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean. So you think it will be a problem with regards to jobs or expansion of aluminum plants? Yes, this is what the unions in these sectors are telling us, and I trust their assessment. So I think that you also work in the union setting. Yes. We don't have any aluminum workers where I work, but we do know them. We're in contact with them. So it's a small setting. Yes, thank you. Already? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderpool. I have two questions in 2 minutes. The first is given the issue around August 1st and the dairy year, I wonder, do you think that if the ratification is completed prior to August 1st, or if the agreement is implemented prior to August 1st, would it have enough impact on your industry to justify an additional compensation package based on the impact of the time that the deal is ratified?
Definitely. And we have, in fact, calculated what we think that cost will be.
Okay. And we heard yesterday from the Teamsters, I believe it was, that they're, of the view that given the targeted impact on the dairy sector of this deal, that not only producers and processors are affected, but there's a lot of workers that work in those plants, and that they ought to, whether it's pension bridging or assistance for retraining and job search, but that they should be considered in that compensation package as well. And would you be supportive of that?
Yes, definitely. The workers, the ancillary workers, whether it's the transporters, et cetera, all are affected by this. So it will have wide effects. Just directly in our industry, we employ over 220,000 people. So they'll all be affected by this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to all of the witnesses. Apologies for having to cut people off occasionally, but the members are all on a timeline, and my job is to make sure that everybody gets their fair share of time. So thank you all very much. It was a very interesting panel. We'll suspend for 5 minutes. Resuming debate and discussion, we are following up on the pursuant to order reference Thursday, February 6th, Bill C-4, an act to implement the agreement between Canada, the United States of America, and the United Mexican States. With us in this segment of our panel, as an individual, we have Leo Blydrop and Lawrence Herman. From the Assembly of First Nations, we have Judy Whiteduck, Director, Economic Sector, and Risa Schwartz, Legal Counsel. From the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters, Matthew Poirier, Director of Policy, and Alan Arkan, Chief Economist. And from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, we have the Mayor of Windsor, Drew Dilkins, and we will open up our panel for discussion. And we will go with our Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Mr. Dilkins, if you'd like to go first.
Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Parliamentary Secretary Bendea, and members of the Standing Committee on International Trade. As I sit in my office right now at Windsor City Hall, which you can't quite see behind me, you'll have to trust me, and you can pull up your Google Maps. It's about 1.5 kilometers behind me, out the window behind me, is the city of Detroit and the United States. And I want to thank you, and I think it's appropriate to have this opportunity to provide some comments on Bill C-4, the Canada-U.S.-Mexico Agreement Implementation Act. Now, I don't need to tell anyone in the room that Canada is a trading nation, that our prosperity, our growth, and our success is largely reliant on our ability to trade with other countries. I'm the mayor of the city of Windsor, also a member of the FCM Big City Mayor Caucus, and my community is home to 240,000 people, and we are set in a region of nearly 400,000 people. Our city is the largest border city in Canada, where the local economy is really, truly intricately tied to that of Detroit, Michigan, and the United States. We are home to the busiest commercial border crossing between the United States and Canada, and in fact, the Windsor-Detroit border crossings handle more than 1/3 of all Canada-U.S. land trade over 4 points of entry: the Ambassador Bridge, the Detroit-Windsor Tunnel, CP Rail Tunnel, and the Windsor-Detroit Truck Ferry. Now, the importance of trade with the United States to this area is further punctuated by the fact that one of our nation's largest infrastructure projects is underway, that being the construction of the Gordie Howe Bridge linking Windsor and Detroit, Canada, and the United States. This project has survived the test of time through 4 Canadian prime ministers and 4 U.S. presidents representing Democrat, Republican, Liberal, and Conservative parties. It has made it this far because smart people on both sides of the border understand the value of smooth and efficient border crossings and the value of trade to our economies and what it means for jobs. Nowhere is the value of secure, efficient, and safe movement of goods and people so important than to the Windsor-Essex area, likely more so than anywhere else in Canada. Windsor is proud to be the automotive capital of Canada and home to the largest cluster of tool, die, and mold makers in North America. Our 2 largest private employers are the Fiat Chrysler Assembly Plant, home to the Dodge Grand Caravan and Chrysler Pacifica, and the Ford Motor Company that operates 2 engine plants locally. Windsor-Essex is also home to the largest auto cluster in North America, with more than 300 local companies engaging in engineering, designing, and manufacturing of cutting-edge industrial systems and products for clients across the globe. This is an industry that supports thousands of well-paying, highly skilled jobs, and one that comprises 30% of our regional GDP. The auto sector is vital to the economy of Windsor-Essex, but it's also vital to the overall economy of Canada, as well as various regional economies throughout the United States. Our local supply chains are so tightly integrated based on geography that business is able to take advantage of the best elements that all 3 countries have to offer. Now, there is no better example that I can think of than this. Parts put into a car produced in Canada cross the border an average of 7 times before that car rolls off the end of the production line. And that, I think, is just a great example of how tightly integrated our economies are. Key amendments to the new Canada, U.S., and Mexico agreement will help strengthen and protect well-paying jobs and will help our companies stay highly competitive in a global economy. And that's truly how our employers compete on a global basis. The agreement's updated rules of origins, increasing the regional value content threshold for cars from 75 up from 62.5% is great. That ensures that a higher majority of car parts, such as engines and transmissions, for example, originate in North America in cities like mine. The new agreement also introduces new requirements to help ensure that at least 70% of a producer's steel and aluminum products originate in North America. This agreement has the potential to generate increased automotive production in North America, of course, including cities and areas like Windsor-Essex, as well as additional sourcing opportunities for Canadian part producers, many of whom have local footprints in Canada. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that this new agreement is perfect. It's not. Future revisions to trilateral trade agreements with Mexico and the United States should strongly consider better labor mobility for highly skilled workers so that positions like robotic technicians, machine learning specialists, and other new economy workers can seamlessly travel within the trade zone to meet the changing demands of employers as they and economies evolve. The 8,000 people from my city who cross the border every day into the United States to work understand how important mobility is for their livelihood and for that of their employers. Now, there's an old axiom taught in many law schools, and that says the best agreement is usually the one that leaves each party thinking they could have done just a little bit better. And there's no doubt that is the case in this negotiation and revision to our trade agreement. However, the incremental improvements achieved through the process far outweigh any negative aspects. The political and economic improvements, or environments rather, juxtaposed with the benefits of this bill lead me to offer my full support to the federal government. And on behalf of the people in Windsor-Essex, I encourage Parliament to move quickly to ratify this deal. And I personally thank Minister Freeland for her efforts on behalf of all Canadians. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mayor Dilkens. On to Mr. Herman.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I prepared a brief. I don't know if it has been distributed to the members of the committee or not.
And I don't know whether it's been circulated to the committee, I'm going to just summarize what I've said in the memorandum, and I hope that we can have an exchange during the question and answer period.
It has been
and I wasn't
distributed,
sure.
Mr. Herman. Thank you very much. It has been distributed to the committee members.
Thank you. I won't go through the paper in any detail. I'll just summarize some points. Bill C-4 is an implementation measure. It adjusts Canadian laws to bring those laws into conformity with the agreement, CUSMA. And it needs parliamentary approval, obviously, to make those changes to Canadian statutes. And those changes, set out in the bill, will allow Canada to ratify the treaty. I think it's important to understand that the conclusion of treaties and their ratification is an executive act, doesn't legally require parliamentary approval for the government of Canada to ratify an agreement, but the policy for many years has been to submit major agreements, trade agreements in particular, to Parliament for parliamentary approval. And of course, before Canada could ratify any agreement, whether it's a trade agreement or otherwise, Canadian laws have to be brought into line with the provisions of the agreement. If Canada were to ratify an agreement and Canadian laws had not been made consistent with the agreement, Canada would be, as a country, as a state, in breach of its obligations under the agreement. So let's come to C4, and I want to give you a little bit more context about C4. There's nothing that I could see in C4 that is in any way inconsistent with the provisions of CUSMA. I have to say, and I think this is important in terms of context, CUSMA is a done deal. The negotiations are over. This committee is not being charged with renegotiating or proposing renegotiating the CUSMA. It is done. The U.S. has ratified it. Mexico has ratified it. And it is now Canada's turn to ratify the agreement, and that requires that Canadian laws be changed and adjusted in some respects. In some cases, it's a matter of tinkering, but in some respects, Canadian laws, statutes have to be changed, and that's what C4 does. This committee, it seems to me, has three options. It can approve C4, possibly with some minor tinkering here and there. I don't think there's much that needs to be done in that regard, if anything. So it can approve the bill as presented. Secondly, the second option would be to propose amendments to C4 with or without a recommendation that the treaty be approved. It could radically amend C4 to change its contents, making them inconsistent with what Canada has agreed to in CUSMA. Or thirdly, it could refuse to approve C4 and refuse to recommend Canadian approval of CUSMA. The latter two options or scenarios would mean that Canada could not ratify the agreement. This would be, in my view, an enormous setback for the country, and in fact, would be without precedent. There has never been an instance in Canadian history where Parliament has refused to approve a trade agreement and to pass the necessary legislation. Now, we know that in 1987, 1988, the original Canada-U.S. Free Trade Agreement was held up in the Senate after it had passed the House. An election was held, and we know the consequences. A conservative government was returned with a majority, and the House subsequently passed the necessary implementing legislation. in the case of the NAFTA, before it was presented to the Trade Committee, or indeed tabled in the House, there were changes made to the NAFTA as renegotiated because both Canada and the U.S. and Mexico agreed that side letters would be necessary to add to the negotiated text of the agreement, and the NAFTA implementing bill was tabled in the House and it was approved. Canadian implementing legislation in other areas have been approved by the House. The European Trade Agreement, the CITA, and the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement both have been approved by the House. If any one of the negative scenarios that I outlined were to be proposed and approved by the House as a whole, I think the consequences would be disastrous. It would mean that the U.S. and Mexico would have ratified CUSMA, Canada would not, and I assume that Mexico and the U.S. would go ahead with the implementation and all of the other matters under the agreement. Canada would not be a party to that agreement. It would complicate things enormously in terms of supply lines and other matters. But more than that, it would set back Canada-U.S. relations in a major way. If this agreement, as I said, negotiated, signed, approved, and ratified by the U.S. and Mexico, were turned down by Canada, legally, at least initially, the NAFTA would then remain in force as between Canada and the United States. There would be serious doubts about whether the NAFTA would be continued by the U.S. administration, by this particular administration, under that scenario. The future of the NAFTA itself would be extremely uncertain. So the question then before this committee is what would be the consequences for Canada if Parliament, by following through with any such recommendation by this committee, were to refuse to approve the CUSMA and pass the necessary implementing legislation. That is the issue that you're faced with. Now, I know that in previous deliberations of this committee, suggestions have been made to reopen the NAFTA because one or another interest groups are not happy with certain of its provisions. That is, frankly, a non-starter. The United States and Mexico, but particularly the United States, will not agree to reopen this agreement. It has passed the U.S. Congress, it's been ratified by the President, and the suggestion that Canada could go back to the U.S. government and say that it wanted to reopen this agreement is frankly fantasy land. It will not happen. And even if it did, in the remotest of possibilities, even if the United States and Mexico were prepared to reopen the NAFTA, or sorry, the CUSMA, because of Canada's insistence, we would have to look at starting negotiations again, going through all of the process of negotiating and putting on the table our starting position and being prepared to make compromises because, as Mr. Verhoeven said in his testimony, trade negotiations are questions of balancing concessions. So Canada would have to put on the table its starting bid and be prepared to make concessions. This is, to me, the most unrealistic of scenarios. So,
thank you very much, Mr. Herman. Apologies for cutting you off, but
that's fine.
The committee has many questions for you. So on to our next is Mr. Blydrup, please.
Well, it's still morning, so good morning. Leo Blydrup here. I'm a farmer in Dufferin, Ontario, Dufferin County, Ontario. That's around Orangeville. I started farming there in about 1995. I had a prior career in agriculture chemicals. I started off with about 250 acres and worked myself up to about 1,300 acres. I farm with my son, and we have a number of part-time employees. I grow a number of crops that are covered by the agreement: canola, corn, oats, soybeans, winter wheat, hay, and straw. And I have grown barley, white beans, and quinoa in the past. And as far as the trade deal is concerned, there's nearly no change from NAFTA. Nothing has really changed for me. And I'm a proponent of free trade, so we could go home from here. But it's been my experience that trade is never quite that simple, and it's never free or fair or equal in my point of view. So I want to spend some time going into that, if I might. So just recently we've had this trade tiff with China, or the U.S. has, and we've got caught up in the crossfire, so I want to spend a little bit of time on that. The U.S. has offered trade distorting domestic support to their farmers, which our government hasn't seen fit to match. So after the U.S. launched the trade war with China, and I'm reading here, so if you have this text, hopefully you do. After the U.S. launched the trade war with China, retaliatory Chinese tariffs were introduced in June of 2018, which saw the price of soybeans drop about 10% on the Chicago Board of Trade. The Chicago Board of Trade also determines all of our prices in Canada, so most of the commodities other than canola and barley are traded on that exchange. And consequently, producer prices, and then canola, which is a bit linked to soybeans because it's an interchangeable commodity for vegetable oil and for meal, it dropped about 5%, but then it dropped about another 5% when we detained the Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou. And essentially, Canada stopped buying all of our canola. China was the biggest customer of canola. Most of the canola is grown in Western Canada, but we do grow some canola in the area where I farm in Ontario. The U.S. responded to the Chinese tariffs on agriculture products, primarily soybeans, in 2018 by introducing the USDA Market Facilitation Program, or MFP, that has given U.S. farmers $12 billion in 2018 and $16 billion in 2019. And I'm just quoting here from the fact sheet. The 2018 MFP provides direct payments to help producers who have been directly impacted by illegal retaliatory tariffs resulting in loss of traditional exports. The initial MFP rates are as follows. So corn, it was 1 cent a bushel. Soybeans was $1.65. So that's about 95% of that money went to soybean growers. And there was also a little bit of that went to wheat. And these are all crops that trade freely across the border and compete with what I'm trying to produce here in Ontario. So we have been impacted equally by this damage that was a result of the trade war between the U.S. and China, and we have not gotten any government support. And then for 2019, they changed the program a little bit because I think they had some concerns about how different trade partners might react to it. So they made it a lot more or less directly linked to a specific crop. They actually changed it a fair bit to make it county specific. But in the end, the average farmer in Illinois got another $21 an acre more than he did in the previous year. So there was that was cited in a weekly Farm Economics Gardener Policy Series paper that was authored by the University of Illinois and Ohio State University. So what does that mean for me in Ontario? Well, we grew 284.5 acres of soybeans in 2018 and had a production of 16,040 bushels. If you convert $1.65 US, that comes out to $220 Canadian. And if you multiply that through to by 16,040 bushels, that was $35,000, just over $35,000 that I didn't get that my American competitors did get. For corn, I would have got a little bit, $294, and for soft red winter wheat, I would have got just over $3,000 for a total of $38,700 that I'm behind my U.S. competitor. In 2019, if I apply the same ratios, I would have had $51,580 out of that program if I had an address in Michigan. And during this time, there's been considerable U.S. soybeans that come right into Ontario that is processed and exported through Hamilton, displacing Ontario soybeans. To date, our federal government has done nothing that I'm aware of to address this disparity in crop farmer support between Canada and the U.S., while it has paid compensation to other agriculture sectors. Dairy farmers, for example, have been allocated $1.75 billion for trade injury that has not yet occurred and may not occur, or if it does occur, may be impossible to measure. And that's a quote from Agri Week, Canada's agribusiness authority since 1967. I don't have anything against dairy farmers, but I think farmers need to be treated equitably when there are trade issues. I sat on a government committee for 3 years and had the opportunity to travel to Ottawa about 3 times a year from 2015, 16, and 17. I was a federally appointed producer representative to the National Program Advisory Committee. We met to discuss Canadian Agriculture Partnership programs, and much of the time was spent discussing business risk management programs and agri-stability in particular. This was largely an exercise in frustration for many of us producer representatives, as our input was never considered or implemented. Agri-stability was changed in 2013, and it became a much less useful program for stabilizing farm income, as a reference margin that triggered payment was reduced from 85% to 70%. Changes were also made as to eligible expenses used in the calculation, with a cap on certain expenses. Hence, many growers dropped out of agri-stability, as did I at the recommendation of my accountant. The response from AAFC, that's Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada staff, was that our proposals would not pass the scrutiny of countervail and were likely to be classified as amber domestic support programs. Now, I haven't seen any discussion at all from federal government or even from the provincial government whether the support that had been offered in 2018 and 2019 by the American government, the USDA facilitation program, is in fact countervailable. At least I certainly think that the 2018, because it was very specific and very regional, would be countervailable. Or whether it would fall in any of the boxes that are either amber, blue, or green. If we're going to have free trade, we need a government that will take a proactive approach in monitoring the domestic support programs of other CUSMA countries and determine their impact on market price in Canada and their ability to distort trade. I, as an individual farmer, do not have the resources to do this or the expertise. And I spent about a day trying to get ready for this, so I don't know much about trade, but I've just told you everything I know. And then there's another area of competitiveness that, there's many of these things that continue to creep on us, and I'll just harp on one more now that I have the floor, and if I have a few minutes left.
1.5 minutes left.
Well, I think we can do it. There are a myriad of other factors affecting competitiveness of Canadian farmers, such as cost of production inputs, farm equipment, interest rates, and labor. The recently introduced carbon tax raises costs to Canadian farmers and not our competitors. It adds to our cost of drying grain, and 2019 was a terrible year because we couldn't get any grain off dry. It adds to the cost of nitrogen fertilizer manufacturing, custom trucking, and rail transportation. It is unlikely the tax will alter consumption of these uses, but it does decrease competitiveness of Canadian farmers who can't pass on this added cost to their customers. And if we're so interested in carbon, why isn't there offset that would pay farmers to sequester carbon if their farming practices indeed do that? And with that, I will end, and hopefully I'm within my time.
Yes, you are, sir. Thank you very much. On to our Assembly of First Nations, Ms. Whiteduck, Director of Economic Sector, and Risa Schwartz, Legal Counsel. Welcome. Glad to have you here today.
Miigwech, thank you. Kwe Kakina, members, chair, and fellow witnesses. Nindo Jiba, Kirigan Zibi, Algonquinaki, an Indigenous cause, Judy Whiteduck. And I just wanted to acknowledge yourselves, all of you, myself and the territory before we begin. We have a brief set of remarks that we'll share and which I will start with. Thank you, first of all, for the invitation to the National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations to appear before your committee to inform the study of Bill C-4. The National Chief has sent his regrets due to other commitments, and we are pleased to be here on his behalf. My name is Judy Whiteduck, and I'm the Director of the Economic Sector. I'm joined by Risa Schwartz, our Legal Counsel on International Trade Matters. The AFN is a national organization advocating for First Nation citizens in Canada, which includes more than 900,000 First Nation people, both living on reserves and in towns and urban centers. First Nation leaders direct the work of the Assembly of First Nations through resolutions passed at Chiefs' Assemblies. In 2019, the AFN passed Resolution 37-2019, which was continued advocacy on Canada's international trade agreements to achieve economic reconciliation, which urged greater participation of First Nations in international trade negotiations and called upon Canada to include a trade and Indigenous peoples chapter in future international trade agreements. The AFN has a specific Chiefs Committee on Economic Development, which includes First Nation trade relations. In 2017, the National Chief was welcomed by Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland to be a member of the NAFTA Council. At an officials level, Risa Schwartz and I also participate on the Indigenous Working Group on International Trade for Canada, the United States, Mexico Agreement, CUSMA. While there's more work to do, this work has resulted in the most inclusive international agreement for Indigenous peoples to date. I will now ask Risa to provide additional comments on CUSMA and as well to make a recommendation for an amendment to Bill C-4. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. With the ratification of CUSMA, Canada, working together with First Nations, will be taking steps to make international trade more inclusive and more equitable for Indigenous peoples, and especially for Indigenous women. CUSMA didn't ultimately include a trade and Indigenous peoples chapter, but the text of the final agreement mainstreamed many important provisions for First Nations. CUSMA maintains Canada's traditional reservations, exceptions, and exclusions in the areas of services, investment, environment, and state-owned enterprises. It continues the WTO agreement on procurement carve-outs for Indigenous businesses. It contains provisions that recognize the important role that Indigenous peoples play in conserving the environment. There is a new emphasis in CUSMA on cooperation activities to promote and enhance opportunities for Indigenous businesses in the chapter on small and medium-sized enterprises. Indigenous peoples are the youngest and fastest growing demographic in Canada, and opportunities for Indigenous business means opportunities for women and for youth. There is a new provision in CUSMA for handicraft Indigenous textiles and apparel goods, which are now eligible for duty-free treatment. And, importantly, for the first time in a Canadian trade agreement, CUSMA includes protections for inherent and treaty rights through a new general exception in Article 32.5, Indigenous Peoples' Rights. The general exception clause is much stronger than we've seen in other agreements. This new exception clause covers the entire agreement and applies to Indigenous peoples in all three countries. It'll allow all three states to take actions to fulfill their legal obligations to Indigenous peoples. And we'd like to note the investor-state dispute settlement will be phased out as between the United States and Canada. ISDS is a threat to Indigenous peoples' rights. All these matters are groundwork for positive change. Once CUSMA is ratified, we must work together to realize economic gains and to ensure that these provisions are implemented in a manner that provides for greater economic equity for First Nations. We note that the mandate letter for the Minister of Public Services and Procurement includes that at least 5% of federal contracts awarded must be to businesses managed and led by Indigenous peoples. This commitment needs to be monitored by each federal department and reported upon to Cabinet on an annual basis to ensure that the target is being met. Progress in meeting the 5% target should also be published by the Government of Canada for transparency. While CUSMA is an example of the difference it makes to engage with Indigenous peoples at an early stage, there must be increased opportunities for First Nations to participate directly in international trade negotiations, consistent with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The Assembly of First Nations will continue to advocate that Canada moves beyond engagement and invites First Nations to the negotiations table. Includes trade and Indigenous peoples chapters in all new or modernized international trade agreements. Explicitly acknowledges the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples in international trade and investment agreements. Ensures that a general exception to protect Indigenous peoples' rights, such as the one in CUSMA, is a red line item for negotiation agreements. Like New Zealand, Canada must commit to protecting Indigenous rights in international trade agreements. This is not a matter that should be up for negotiation. As well, we ask that Canada halt the negotiation of new ISDS provisions in new international trade and investment agreements, and to remove ISDS provisions when older agreements are being modernized. Finally, we ask Canada to invest in programs and services needed for First Nations trade networks and internation trade so that additional capacity can be established in First Nation trade policy and programs and services. We are also here today to recommend an amendment to Bill C4. The bill is missing a non-derogation clause. The non-derogation clause amendment was proposed previously by the National Chief when he appeared before this committee during the study for Bill C100. All implementing legislation for international agreements that have the potential to impact inherent and treaty rights must include a non-derogation clause. It is not just international trade and investment agreements that can impact inherent and treaty rights, but also how the agreement is implemented through domestic regulatory and policy matters. A non-derogation clause will clarify that the Act and CUSMA shall be construed as to uphold existing Aboriginal and treaty rights recognized and affirmed in our Constitution. Miigwech for the opportunity today to present to the Standing Committee on International Trade.
Thank you very much. On to the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters, Matthew Poirier, Director of Policy, and Ellen Arcan, Chief Economist.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to be here on behalf of Canada's 90,000 manufacturers and exporters and our association's 2,500 direct members to support Bill C4, an act to implement the agreement between Canada, the United States of America, and the United Mexican States, also known as CUSMA. Before I begin, I would like to thank the efforts of the Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister Freeland, Chief Negotiator Verhoeven, and all of their staff for negotiating CUSMA. Being part of the process, we at Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters, or CME, understand how difficult these negotiations were. It was crucial to achieve a positive outcome for business and all their employees, and we did just that. As such, CME fully supports this bill, and we urge the government and all parliamentarians to ratify CUSMA as soon as possible. My goal today is simple. I want to explain why free trade is important to manufacturing and how CUSMA will improve on NAFTA. So, why is free trade so important? Simply put, North American trade is the basis upon which Canada's manufacturing industry is built. Our sector alone employs 1.7 million workers in every community across the country. In 2019, we shipped $455 billion of merchandise exports to the US and Mexico. This represented 77% of our total exports to all countries that year. 2/3 of these exports, worth about $305 billion, were manufactured goods. The numbers simply speak for themselves. You see, Canadian, American, and Mexican manufacturers don't really compete with one another. Rather, we build stuff together. A continental manufacturing ecosystem bound together by integrated supply chains. North American free trade is therefore a pillar of our national economy. It is why the manufacturing sector produces the bulk of Canada's exports. It is how the sector can compete against the rest of the world. This is why CUSMA, and NAFTA before it, is so important. Without this agreement, and without integrated production with the US and Mexico, we simply would not have the scale necessary to be a global player. Canada's ability to take advantage of any other trade deal is only possible if North America continues to manufacture together. So, how does CUSMA improve on NAFTA? CUSMA preserves the integrated manufacturing operations that allows the relative free flow of goods and services between our three markets. Going into the negotiations, our members made it clear to us that the primary objective of Canada must be to do no harm to this integrated manufacturing economy. CUSMA accomplished this. In fact, CUSMA preserves many of the key elements of the original NAFTA, which were targets of the U.S. for elimination. This includes dispute settlement mechanisms and the business traveler visa exemptions. This was by no means assured at the outset, but there they are, alive and well. Importantly, CUSMA updates critical areas of NAFTA, dragging it into the 21st century. This alone will significantly enhance North American trade. For example, the new digital trade chapter recognizes now that the internet is a thing and establishes a framework for e-commerce in North America. The Customs Administration and Free Trade Facilitation chapter will also go a long way in modernizing borders throughout North America, enabling the free flow of goods. And lastly, Chapter 26, the new competitiveness chapter, has not garnered a lot of attention, but it is, in our estimation, one of the biggest accomplishments of CUSMA. Why? Well, it sets up a framework for 3 sovereign countries to become a unified trade bloc. It will do this by promoting better coordination and integration of our manufacturing industries so that we can tackle global trade challenges together. This is a significant accomplishment. We have consistently urged the government to start work on implementing parts of the agreement now, like Chapter 26, that do not require legal changes. We should be looking to make early progress by establishing committees for North American competitiveness and good regulatory practices as outlined in the agreement. This would show Canadian leadership, signal to our other partners that we take CUSMA seriously, and let us hit the ground running. Once CUSMA is the law of the land, we need to pivot towards helping manufacturers and exporters take advantage of the new deal. The U.S. is, and will always remain, our largest export market. We must leverage the excellent government resources, like the Trade Commissioner Service and Export Development Canada, to help companies transition from NAFTA to CUSMA. Limited access to U.S. government procurement market is also a big challenge. We encourage the government to work with the Americans on a bilateral basis to open up this lucrative area for Canadian firms. This is how government can play a positive role in helping companies capitalize on CUSMA once it's in force. In the final analysis, CUSMA is a good deal for Canada, and given the very challenging negotiations, an impressive achievement. We urge all parties to pass this bill as quickly as possible. If you do that, I can assure you that Canadian manufacturers will return the favor by creating prosperity for all Canadians for years to come. Thank you, and I look forward to the discussion.
Okay, thank you all very much. On to Mr. Lewis.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for all the witnesses this morning. Very interesting to see the various dynamics. So I thank you for that. Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Of course, I'm coming straight to you from Ottawa. The floor. He is literally sitting in the Florida of Canada, by the way, folks. And I will vouch for him that indeed behind him is Detroit. So you're welcome for that one, Mr. Mayor. A couple questions for you this morning, sir. So first and foremost. Thank you for representing FCM and the big city mayors this morning. That's really exciting for, of course, myself and this committee to see. And I've noted that the FCM and big city caucuses are enthusiastic about the new NAFTA. If I could be so bold to suggest that Windsor-Essex is truly a microcosm of Canada, in that we have whatever Canada has to offer, quite frankly, we pretty much have the same thing to offer, be it the auto sector, be it agriculture, commercial fishing, so to speak, mining, and the list goes on and on. So we are very much in a unique situation here that we kind of got the pulse of what's going on across from coast to coast to coast. That being said, it certainly does appear, I'm speaking specifically to CUSMA right now, it does appear to be good news for the auto sector of course, and it's good news for our region, both Windsor-Essex, given the importance of the automotive sector to our region. And let me also say that we are the party of free trade, and we certainly do not intend to hold up this agreement. But let me also be very, very clear. It's important that we do our due diligence. I don't know if you know, but I would hope that you do. If you don't, you'd be interested to know that despite repeated requests, we have still not received an economic impact statement. Why is that vital? Well, we're getting down to crunch time. We need to make some very serious decisions, and quite frankly, it makes it very difficult to do our due diligence without that. One example to illustrate the kind of data that is needed, an issue of significance for our region, Labor has supported the clause that requires that 40% of cars produced in Mexico be completed by workers making at least $16 an hour, $20 Canadian. There is an assumption that automotive manufacturing jobs will migrate north, and that would be good news, of course, for us, if that assumption proves correct. But because of the lack of analysis, we don't know how many jobs are expected to be created in Canada. An economic impact study would provide a frame of reference for us to track those numbers. Now, obviously, if the City of Windsor, as an example, were to do a P3 type of an agreement with someone, certainly staff and council would ensure that they knew what the economic impact would be on the City of Windsor, as an example. So on behalf of the FCM, has the FCM done an impact statement, economic impact statement of the new NAFTA, and does it intend to monitor the impacts going forward?
Yeah, so Mr. Lewis, thank you very much for the question. Nice to see you as well, and congratulations. I haven't seen you since being sworn in, so congratulations to you and to all the members who were elected and re-elected. To the best of my knowledge, FCM has not conducted that particular type of analysis. I think from a high level, if we look at the value provided to all cities by having an excellent trade deal and an ability to make sure that goods can continue to flow, and as you pointed out, the Windsor-Essex area being definitely a microcosm of Canada, but certainly probably a leader when it comes to the nature of trade and the reliance on trade between the United States and Canada. And there's no better place than to look at than this particular area, the Windsor-Essex area. And so I get that there may be, and I think I acknowledge that in my remarks, that this isn't a perfect, there was no plan or there was no way to make this perfect at the end of the day. And with the economic environment, with the political environment that's out there, certainly I think we understood very acutely in my conversations expressing to Deputy Prime Minister Freeland during the negotiations that, there were people in the community who were very, very scared about what might happen. And certainly the consideration that we have as a community, and I'm sure FCM would echo this in many ways, is when I look at General Motors' decision in Oshawa to close the plant and to reallocate work, if I consider the prospect of that happening locally in my community because there is more friction put into the system, and I mean trade friction, the economic impact and what would happen to our local community would be very, very devastating. So FCM certainly is briefed on the high level matters here. There are many points I think we all agree to, especially on the automotive front when it comes to the regional value, the regional content value being increased, looking at steel and aluminum as well, with the requirement for more North American production of the same, that overall it presents a good value proposition for Canadians, Canadian businesses, and jobs in Canada as well.
Thank you very much. How much time left, Madam Chair, please?
50 seconds.
50 seconds. Mr. Mayor, very, very quickly to you, specific to the Gordie Howe Bridge, I know very exciting, long time in the works. And as you also mentioned in your opening statement, I mean, an auto part literally passes across the border 7 times typically. My question specifically is with regard to the administration of CUSMA. Do you foresee, or does the FCM see any issues with regard to, specific to Windsor-Detroit, obviously being the busiest border crossing in North America, do you have any concerns of your own about the implementation and potential for blockages?
And a short response, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't see any issue with respect to blockages. I think the actual extra capacity with the bridge will certainly mean that there will be redundancy in the system and a better ability with all of the high-tech infrastructure that's being installed. It will certainly allow goods to cross much quicker than with the existing infrastructure.
Thank you. Mr. Raya.
Thank you, Yeah, Dilkins, I don't have any questions, but I know you're experimenting with Amazon Ring Doorbell and Neighborhood app. I look forward to see how that goes. The Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters Association, thank you all for your work, in helping this deal done. You said the government has a positive role to play. Government, in association with you and so many other Canadians, has successfully concluded this deal. You did mention that you expect your members to scale up to become global players based on the strength of this agreement. They can use this agreement for their manufacturing to increase their manufacturing capabilities and become global players. And you also said that you would like to see your members competing with the rest of the world with the strength of this particular agreement. However, some of your members, yesterday we had members, one of your major members, the Association of Steel Producers and the Association of Aluminum Producers here. Their members, the entire aluminum industry and the steel industry, they are focused only on North American market. It has been 15 years since we had a new smelter constructed here in Canada. The steel industry production for 20 years has been hovering around 15-16 million tons. So they are not investing to increase the capacity, to become a global player, to compete with the rest of the compete in the rest of the world. So they are content with just going after this captive market. Is it the right approach?
Without commenting on what an individual business of our members are doing, they're all competitors, right? So they have their own plans, certainly. But what we're looking at in the context of CUSMA, what this will do is that it'll do two things, right? And they flow from one another. One, it'll bring back certainty to the Canadian market.
I understand that. My question specifically is that, do you expect your members to increase their capacity to become global players, to compete with the rest of the world market based on this strength?
Yeah, and so that's where I was going with this, was that the certainty that once this is done, a done deal, that this will return to the market. It is our hope that that will bring back investment flows back into Canada. Because what happens when you have all this uncertainty in an unnegotiated trade agreement for something as fundamental to manufacturing as NAFTA or CUSMA is that all the investment dollars go to the safest harbor, which in this situation is the United States. So our hope...
How long? We had NAFTA for very long. The uncertainty was only for over 2 years.
Right.
So you think that all the investment dollars that went to US occurred only in those 2 years frame? I'm looking at the trade between Canada and the US. It has basically remained stagnant. In US dollars terms, I think 2012 we had around $324 billion, and last year it is $319 billion. It is not increasing.
Yeah. Well, I think what that speaks to as well is the increasing uncompetitiveness of Canadian market to do business in for manufacturers.
You talk of increasing competitiveness. We had NAFTA for so long, and we have now this. Okay, uncertainty, right. I can understand that was there for a couple of years. But why Canadian exports are not increasing?
Yeah, well, why exports aren't increasing, there are many reasons to that. NAFTA is only a part of it. Certainly, on average, Canadian businesses are small, and they are smaller than their international counterparts. And what happens when you have so many small businesses is that you don't have the scale and the capacity to be able to export.
So what are you telling me that we have CUSMA today, the new NAFTA today, we have free trade agreement with Europe, we have free trade agreement with Asia Pacific countries. With all these free trade agreements, still we can't grow up?
Exactly. It's the free trade agreement. The analogy I would use is you can bring the horse to the trough.
So what you're saying is that the manufacturing sector is a sunset industry?
No.
Then?
No.
Then what?
Manufacturing in Canada represents a huge part of the economy 1.7 million jobs. It's not going anywhere. But
the
it's
point
certainly.
is that it is not growing up. That's what I'm trying to say.
I'm sorry.
The manufacturing sector is not growing up. It is growing down.
No, it is struggling because of a number of factors. So if we can bring certainty back, one element of certainty back to business decision making in Canada, that having a free trade agreement like CUSMA signed, because it's so fundamental, that's one step.
No,
we have lots to do.
No,
and trust me, we could talk to you for hours about all the competitiveness issues.
NAFTA for long years, decades we had. Then we have brought in the free trade agreement with European Union. Now we have free trade agreement with Asia Pacific. But look at the steel and aluminum, they are the primary producers. They have not invested $1 to increase the installed capacity. And they don't have any plans to do that. They are quite open about it.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, Mr. Ayre, there's no opportunity for an answer to that. Mr. Savard-Tremblay.
Thank you all. Thank you for coming here today. I would like to ask a question to the Assembly of First Nations. First of all, I would like to say that we're in the middle of a crisis. There are a lot of prejudices that are being sent out with regards to First Nations, and this is unacceptable, and I hope that we'll be able to change this. There's been a lot of ups and downs, and we need to condemn these types of statements. Everyone has to discuss things in dignity and respect. Now, my question, you spoke, well, let's talk about the process around negotiations. There's always a lack of transparency, and you spoke to the fact that we always had to consult First Nations during negotiation processes for trade agreements. Do you feel that you were consulted adequately?
Consultation was definitely not adequate. With NAFTA and other trade agreements in the past, there was no consultation with First Nations. And consultation is probably not the best word to use. It's engagement. So when we're talking about consultation, you're talking about consultation pursuant to the Constitution, and the duty to consult is not being met. What we're talking about now is engagement, and engagement with national organizations such as the Assembly of First Nations, as well as Métis and Inuit organizations, and some rights holders through modern treaties. Certainly the government in the past couple of years, and especially for CUSMA, has put an increased emphasis on engagement with First Nations. But there is still more work to do, and that is part of our presentation today, to discuss moving beyond engagement, which is happens outside of the room and happens after sometimes decisions are made, sometimes before, through an Indigenous working group. So what we're talking about is participation in the room. And bringing First Nations to the table. So if we're going to have future trade and Indigenous chapters and trade agreements, you need to have First Nation negotiators. So then we're not talking about engagement or consultation, we're talking about participation. And participation is more in line with the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So as the government is looking towards implementing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, we'd urge participation in decision making so that there's true decision making being done with First Nations about matters that implicate and affect their rights through their treaties and inherent rights.
Okay. So generally speaking, you're speaking for First Nations, but more generally, many groups, many organizations indicate that the consultations, you're talking about engagement, okay, but that there should be more dialogue with civil society in the definition of future agreements. Have you thought of a formula, something that could allow for this dialogue, and also taking into account different groups, different communities, how files can be advance, but also how you can involve First Nations peoples.
I think it's a dual answer to that. The government's also been doing stakeholder engagements, and we've participated in that as well as with other stakeholders. And I think the stakeholder engagement that the Government of Canada has done for CUSMA has been excellent. Much more engagement with all parts of society, and many phone calls and many opportunities to give their input. And I'm sure some of the gentlemen at this table could talk to that as well. There are many different opportunities there. But when we're talking about First Nations, we're talking about rights that are impacting treaties. So we need to move beyond that engagement. There was certainly more engagement with the First Nation organizations and some other either academics, members of a business community that were able to participate through this Indigenous working group. But no, it's not enough. The National Chief has been advocating quite strongly for participation in decision making and for being at the negotiation table, for being in the rooms where decisions are being made, because that leads to better decisions, and creates atmospheres for economic stability as well.
So I'd like to ask a question to Mr. Herman. Can you hear me? Mr. Herman in Toronto? Yes. Great. So in the definition of the past NAFTA, you spoke about different procedures without opening up the trade agreement, but to change certain aspects. So the ability, you spoke about exchange of letters. Could you speak to this procedure, this exchange of letters to change a section rather than opening up the whole agreement?
Very briefly, Mr. Herman.
Yes, well, in the NAFTA, there was an understanding that certain parts of the agreement didn't cover environment and labor, and so the three governments decided that they would have an exchange of letters outside the legal framework of the agreement to establish two commissions, one on labor and one on environment, and that was agreed to by the three governments before the NAFTA was put to their respective parliaments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Herman. On to Mr. Blakey.
Thank you very much. And I just want to start by saying thank you to everybody who's appeared today and shared their thoughts. I want to direct my first question to our guests from the Assembly of First Nations and just ask, well, first of all, recognize that Canada is in some extraordinary circumstances right now, I think in part because the federal government has done a bad job of recognizing Indigenous rights and title and not got the kind of clarity that we need in order to be able to move forward. Not just Section 35, but also treaties and Canada's commitment to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples are foundational documents for Canada. It seems odd. I mean, we don't normally need clauses in agreement to say that the agreement can't override our Constitution. And I'm just wondering, how can we go about ensuring that these foundational documents really are protected and that it's clear that something like a trade agreement can't take precedence over the fundamental legal framework and understanding of Canada and between Canada and First Peoples. So you've talked a little bit about the addition of a non-derogation clause to the legislation. I'm curious to know how that would work and how that interacts with Section 32.5 of the agreement, and which I note only talks about Section 35 and self-governance agreements. It doesn't talk about UNDRIP, and it doesn't mention treaties either.
I'll answer the first part of the question first, but thank you very much for that question. The importance of and a lot of legislation does include non-derogation clauses. And in fact, the Senate, I believe it was a few years ago, the Senate subcommittee looking at Aboriginal issues recommended that all Canadian legislation include a non-derogation clause across the board. That hasn't been implemented yet, but that was definitely a recommendation. And because of Section 32.5, which does in the agreement itself protect Indigenous rights, it is important that it's not just CUSMA that has this protection, but also the bill, because this bill will be changing Canadian laws and also creating policies to implement CUSMA. So as we work with the new bill, we also should be aware that that might impact inherent or treaty rights, and that's why there's the importance of having the non-derogation clause in the agreement and in the implementing legislation. I think questions will be, some may ask, why is it important you can't override the Constitution? You've made a comment that I definitely agree, but I think I want just to note there is already a section in the bill as it stands about water. And it clarifies that nothing in the agreement, harms our natural water. So whoever drafted this bill made the decision that it was important to clarify that our natural water is not impacted by the CUSMA. I agree to that as well, but there already is a clarification clause. I would say potentially isn't necessary. CUSMA itself says that. So if it is important to clarify that our water isn't going to be impacted, it is also very important to clarify that the inherent rights of Indigenous peoples is not going to be harmed, because it's similar. You can't really say, oh, that clause is unnecessary, and put another clause that is also unnecessary. I would argue that both are necessary for the same reason. We want to be certain that our water is protected. We also want to be certain that Section 35 rights are protected in CUSMA, but also in the implementation bill. So that is why we've brought forward this proposal.
Right on. Thank you very much. I just have a further question to that. I'm curious. We know that Section 32.5 doesn't mention UNDRIP. Throughout the engagement process, did the government tell you at any point that that was something that they were asking for and that the other parties refused? Or do you have anything that you can share in terms of the process and what we were advocating for, as opposed to, what we don't have maybe because our government never asked?
So although Article 32.5 doesn't specifically mention the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and certainly this is something that the Assembly of First Nations and other Indigenous groups and peoples were and continue to say is very important to be integrated in the agreement, there is in the footnote I would say some language or text that allow for some flexibility, and I think extend the exception beyond Section 35. So the footnote says, for greater certainty for Canada, the legal obligations include those recognized and affirmed by Section 35 of the Constitution, or those set out in self-government agreements between that's also a footnote which clarifies it for Canada, but the actual article talks about legal obligations.
I think we've heard here on a couple of occasions that there may be things that the government, just that we don't have because the government didn't ask because they were fearful that that the U.S. might get upset that Canada was asking for something more. Did the government tell you at any point that they had asked for the inclusion of UNDRIP and it was the U.S. or Mexico that said no?
Not specifically. We didn't get into those conversations, but I do know that the government did put forward a draft Trade and Indigenous Peoples chapter that did include the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So there was an attempt and that chapter ultimately wasn't accepted, and I'm not sure why. We weren't privy to that, but the government did move forward with a proposal.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Carey.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I'd like to start off with the Assembly of First Nations, First Miigwech, and thank you for being here. I was wondering if you could help the committee. We've been trying to get information in regards to economic impact studies, and I was wondering if the government has shared any economic impact studies with you, how it would concern Indigenous people and Indigenous-owned businesses in Canada, and or if you've done your own, and if you're able to share that with us.
Excuse me. Thank you for the question. And maybe just briefly, we don't have an economic impact study at the Assembly of First Nations related to CUSMA and its implementation. definitely there's a need for one. The Government of Canada has not either shared one with us. So it is work that needs to happen. And per some of our earlier comments, we see that there's a certain amount of work that needs to be part of the path forward. And this would definitely be one of them.
Well, and we agree with you, and thank you very much for that. And we will be asking over and over again so that all Canadians have that material. With the same thing, I'm going to be moving over to the Canadian manufacturers and exporters. And first of all, thank you for all your work on this agreement, because what you said is very much true, and we're hearing over and over again, having this agreement is certainly much better than not having the agreement. So we're all committed to getting it passed and getting it implemented to give certainty to business. You highlighted the competitiveness chapter, I think it's 26. Yep. And I know with our government, we were really moving towards convergence of regulations and harmonization. But we are hearing from your members. One of your members yesterday, for example, mentioned how the Buy American exemption, we had an opportunity to leverage with this agreement, and apparently it wasn't even brought up. Softwood lumber agreement, we had a manufacturer, early First Nations manufacturer. Again, we have no conclusion there. We now have a more managed trade agreement versus competitive, especially with the auto industry. And Mayor Dilkens brought up the importance of that. Now, the agreement's not perfect, but sadly in Oshawa, he also brought up Oshawa. You know, it wasn't enough to save our assembly plant, and there is a lot of concern moving forward. So I wanted to ask you about, we were moving towards convergence of regulations. The current government seems to be moving into a situation where we're having very unique Canadian regulations and costs. We've heard even today by Mr. Blydorp about the carbon tax and the uncertainty of how far that's going to be going up. Our transportation system, just-in-time delivery. So I was wondering with maybe Mr. Arcand, when we're talking about investment in Canada, have you done any economic impact studies you could share with us? But also, could you point out what in this agreement would encourage a large investor such as General Motors, Chrysler, to make that investment in Canada versus the United States?
Right. Thank you for your question. Sorry, we don't have any economic impact numbers we can share with you. But I think, just to echo my colleague's comments from a few moments ago, the big, with regard to your question about promoting investment in Canada, I think the big issue to us is the uncertainty that it engendered. The fact that we were going through this negotiating process with our largest trading partner, and the concern of our members and our main concern was just, let's get past this uncertainty. Let's get the CUSMA ratified. And obviously the manufacturing sector still has challenges. Investment in manufacturing has been weak for a number of years, including the past couple. Some of that is trade uncertainty related. So even if we do ratify CUSMA, there's still a number of challenges that we need to address in manufacturing to promote investment. But this is just one hurdle that we can remove, and we can move on to other bigger issues.
Well, and thank you for that. And like I said, we're looking for these economic impact studies because we think it's so important. But what are you doing now for your members who are really concerned? They're happy. We're moving forward with this agreement, but they're really not very happy. Like Mr. Blydorp was saying, we have these unique costs in Canada, which instead of moving towards this North American competitiveness block, like you mentioned, Chapter 26. So we're signing an agreement to say we're going to be more convergence and harmonization, but the actions of the government, the opposite. Are you making your members' voices heard with this government? So yes, we'll get this deal done, but what about communities like mine in Oshawa that need to have those large investments? Are you moving these other issues forward?
Yeah, certainly. And you mentioned Buy American.
There's no time to answer. Mr. Carey took his full 5 minutes. Maybe you can talk to the member a bit later on. Mr. Sarai.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to first correct His Worship Mayor Dilkens of Windsor. Surrey is the largest city that borders the United States and has a population of 500,000 plus people. So as much as you're proud of Windsor, we're also very proud of our city, and a lot of us, our trade is like Windsor, heavily reliant on the U.S., whether it's our softwood lumber, whether it's our logistics, and whether it's other manufacturing. But I just wanted to bring that to your attention. I want to ask you, though, how do you think you're very obviously supportive of this agreement? It promotes trade and growth in your region. How does the certainty affect planning for a city such as yourselves or other cities that border, like my city of Surrey, to plan for the future and plan growth in your area?
Well, it's a very good question, and I love the city of Surrey as well, sir. So no disrespect to your community. It's a great community in Canada. And really, from an FCM perspective, we're all about community building and building cities and making sure that cities have the capacity to compete, not just amongst other cities in Canada, but we're really competing on a global stage. And I can't underscore enough, when it comes to large manufacturers like our largest employer, Fiat Chrysler Automotive and Ford Motor Company, I mean, the fact that they operate here, we feel very privileged that they've operated in our city for a long, long time, but they are competing on a global scale. And, you know, the end of the day, they're looking at a whole variety of different factors, some of which are under municipal control, some of which are under provincial control, and some, of course, which have federal authority that could either help or hurt them. And they're looking for certainty in business. They're looking for the path with least friction to be able to build their product.
I get that. I get that part. What I'm particularly asking is, once a company has certainty and it knows it can grow and has 16 years plus of security on a trade agreement, how does it affect your city planning? Like, how do you commit to your housing strategies? How do you commit to your development in your region? Does it help knowing that the businesses have a relatively solid pathway for the next decade to 2 decades to 3 decades? Does it help you plan in your growth of a city as well?
I think, you know, for some business, for many businesses, including the tool, die, and mold sector here in my region, I would say absolutely it does. We, small and medium, most of them are small and medium-sized enterprises, so they need that certainty in order to be able to figure out what their expansion plans are and what kind of capacity they will need. And of course, that translates into what kind of folks should be coming out of our local community college or the University of Windsor to be able to fill the skills mismatch that we see here, but also when I talk to mayors across Canada, it's seen in every community across Canada. So there is absolutely an interplay with the certainty provided in an agreement like this that allows us to then take away and work with the other partners that we work with in order to make sure that all of the skills exist, that the employers who are here, we can retain them, and then that we can help them grow based on forecasting and planning that they need to make sure that the right people are in place to satisfy their business needs.
Thank you. My next question is to Ms. White Duck of the FN. I want to thank you, and it's good for us to know that our government engaged with the Assembly of First Nations and Indigenous people on this trade agreement, and I hope our government and every preceding government thereafter does this for any future agreements. You had said that this particular CUSMA agreement will help and is better for Indigenous women. Can you elaborate on how it makes it better for Indigenous women? I'd like to know. I have a riding that has one of the highest urban Indigenous population, and obviously 50% of them are women, so it'd be helpful for me to know.
Thank you very much for this question. We're both
Sure.
going to answer
Yes,
it
yeah.
for you. Yes. So Canada has now put more emphasis on gender-based analysis. So there is in CUSMA an emphasis also on women and making CUSMA more accessible for women. So that and the provisions for Indigenous peoples, we feel, will specifically focus on more Indigenous women, as well as an emphasis on digital trade. So Indigenous, the truth about the businesses over the internet is that you can't see who you're dealing with. This is actually where women are really succeeding, is online and where they're able to create businesses and not have to deal with some problems that have been inherent for female-owned businesses in the past. And many Indigenous women are using online to sell goods and services. So that's a way.
You're welcome. Thank you.
On to Mr. Cram.
Yes, well, thank you to all of the witnesses for joining us here today. Mr. Blydorp, I'm from Saskatchewan, so when I think of canola farmers and soybean farmers, I tend to think of my home province, so it's nice to meet someone in that line of work from a different part of the country. I wonder if you could comment a bit on the importance of the growing Chinese market for canola producers and soybean producers such as yourself.
Well, it's been a very big market, and purchases of soybeans and canola has been increasing yearly up until the last year or two, and they've had a major epidemic with African swine fever, which decimated their hog herds. So their requirement for protein was also, and other grains, was diminished because of that, but as a result there was more pork being exported back to China, and hopefully they'll be able to get ahead of that swine fever and resume their own pork production, much as I'd like to see it produced here, because these farmers buy grains and oil seeds from us too. But we see that hopefully growing if we can resolve some of these other trade issues.
Okay.
But yeah, canola was the biggest market of our Canadian canola is China, or has been China.
All right. And there's a clause in the new NAFTA agreement that requires Canada to notify the United States if we are to enter into free trade talks with a non-market economy country, and we can actually be the United States can remove themselves from the new agreement if we were to enter into a free trade agreement with a non-market economy country such as China. So I was wondering if you could comment a bit about what effects that may have on Canadian exports of canola to China if that were to happen or take place.
Well, it would be a big red flag, especially for farmers from the West, where we only grow 50,000 acres of canola, and I think there's about 20 million acres of canola out West. So it would have a much greater impact there, but as I said, China's been the biggest buyer of canola. Now that market has dried up a bit. European rapeseed production is down a little bit, so some more of our canola was going there. And some of our canola is actually being processed here, and they're buying more of their processed product, which is probably good for Canada. But I don't know. Hopefully we get these issues resolved, and we'll be on the same trajectory of increased growth going forward. I can't imagine that canola is a little bit of a small crop in parts of the northwest United States. Why it would even concern them that we sign some kind of an agreement with a commodity that's not of great interest to them, or has marginal impact on what they're doing. But I understand that, yeah, they could do something if they chose to do something. And hopefully they won't.
Okay, thank you. And my next question is for Mr. Poirier and Mr. Archon from the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters. You've both talked a little bit about the struggles that your industry is facing for a number of reasons, and that you have a number of challenges that need to be addressed. Could you expand a little bit on what challenges your industry is facing and what the Government of Canada can do to help?
Certainly. Well, what we're here today is about trade certainty, right? So for manufacturers who are also the bulk of exporters, securing the most important trade deal in our arsenal, so CUSMA, is priority number one. So getting that done as soon as possible is the best thing. And what we hope that we'll see from that is an improvement in the investment flows. So like I mentioned earlier, what concerns us is that when there's such trade uncertainty, especially with our key market like the U.S., is that those trade flows gravitate towards the safest harbor, which is the United States. It's very concerning for us as the industry association, because once that money and that investment goes out of Canada, it doesn't come back. So when you're talking about the economic impact of the industry and the number of jobs tied to it, it's very concerning.
All right, and once these trade uncertainties are resolved, hopefully in the near future, what would be the the next major hurdles to provide certainty in your industry to keep us competitive with the United States, such as electricity costs or infrastructure or taxes or anything?
Yeah, all of the above.
Okay.
But generally speaking, competitiveness is our issue, generally speaking. So, when that comes to basic cost of doing business, so tax structures, investment supports, all these types of things. How do we incent the majority of our small companies to become big companies and global champions? These are issues that we're seized with and what we're focused on. And that ranges from a whole suite of government assistance, but also from the federal and provincial levels as well. So it's working in concert to create an environment in Canada where it can be competitive. And there's lots of ground to cover there to catch up to our global.
Thank you very much. On to Ms. Badayan.
Thank you very much. I'd be happy to continue the discussion with Mr. Poirier. I read here, and I'm going to find it, that 10 out of the 11 CME recommendations were adopted. Is that accurate?
In the current deal?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's very impressive in terms of
We
numbers.
were very pleased.
I can imagine. And in terms of the consultations and the process by which you provided those recommendations, I imagine that you were also pleased with that process. Do you feel as if you were consulted and heard?
Certainly. It helped that we had, like my other co-panelists, a seat at the table for those discussions. Because we're so dependent on NAFTA, it was important for us to be part of those discussions as well. So in terms of how the process went, it was terrifying going through it, simply because I think we weren't necessarily bargaining with people that wanted the same outcomes as we did in terms of having a solid free market, free trade agreement. So given the fact that we were on the defensive from the get-go and trying to retain basic access that we had under NAFTA, I think where we ended up was very positive.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Maître Herman, I would be happy to ask you a question as part of today's committee. I know you by reputation. Prior to being elected, I too was a lawyer in private practice in trade and arbitration law. So it's a pleasure to speak with you today. I listened to your testimony with a lot of interest, and as you mentioned, there are some possibilities of negative scenarios, as I believe you called it. And under those scenarios, if I understand correctly, it is your opinion that the United States and Mexico would go ahead with the implementation of CUSMA without Canada. Is that correct?
That's my sense of what would happen, yes.
And that there is also significant uncertainty as to the applicability then of the pre-existing NAFTA agreement to Canada.
Well, technically, the NAFTA would remain in force as between the United States and Canada. We think it's not entirely certain. But what would happen in that event is that the United States could decide to withdraw from the NAFTA. We know that the president has condemned the NAFTA as one of the worst agreements the United States has ever entered into. And so the question would be, if Canada could not or refused to ratify the new agreement, bringing the NAFTA back into force, would the United States maintain the NAFTA? And I think that that is of some doubt. Whatever happens, there would be tremendous uncertainty. How you would reconcile the NAFTA, if it did continue, with the CUSMA or the USMCA, as it would be highly problematic.
I see. And because of the current stage that we are in, as you mentioned in your testimony, the United States and Mexico having already ratified, our options are, as you mentioned, limited. And basically, what the question to the committee is whether we proceed with the ratification or not.
Correct. Because the new agreement has gone through the ratification processes in both Mexico and the United States, it then becomes very difficult for Canada to refuse ratification or to go back to those other two parties and ask for something more in order to secure ratification. As I mentioned earlier, in the case of the NAFTA, we agreed to side letters with Mexico and the United States, but that was before the agreement was put to their respective legislatures. Frankly, now that the new agreement has gone through the Congress with all of the difficulties it had, it is, in my view, frankly impossible.
Thank you
For
very
the
much.
United States to go through that process again, or for Canada to think that we could get something more by putting it back to the United States.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lane. On to Mr. Savard Tremblay for 2.5 minutes.
Oui, ben, je souhaiterais peut-être continuer justement cette.
I'd like to continue on this exchange with Mr. Herman with regards to the exchange of letters. It's interesting that you spoke to this. There's been a few scenarios that have been brought forth on the way of amending, of specifying, of correcting certain things. You spoke about letters, exchange of letters before the ratification by parliaments, but there was about 20 changes that were brought forth that are not considered amendments because it was an exchange of letters. So this is generally considered as a way of specifying some things that are not specified. But there's also the Free Trade Commission that does allow for formal amendments to an agreement. And in the first 15 years of the application of NAFTA, there were 16 amendments that were brought. To your knowledge, in CUSMA, will it be possible to make these types of changes after ratification?
I think that the Free Trade Commission could issue agreed interpretation rulings. The Commission itself could not amend the agreement. The agreement can only be amended by the three parties and their respective legislatures. However, where it is a matter of interpretation or application of terms of the agreement itself, the Commission could issue certain interpretation bulletins. And in fact, the new Commission will be could be an important part of the unfolding of the CUSMA. It will depend on, obviously, goodwill and good faith by the parties to make the Commission work. But the Commission process, I'm glad you mentioned this, the Commission process could be an important feature of the CUSMA going forward. No question about that.
Parce que la Commission en tant que telle a déjà.
The Commission has already been used, for example, to make definitions more clear, to change the rules of origin, because the rules of origin are being made tighter. And so if we talk about modifying the list of products that are covered by the agreement, that we harmonize procedures with regards to common borders. So this is a Commission that goes even further than a single interpretation.
Mr. Herman?
Well, where there is a lack of clarity in the terms of the agreement, the Commission can issue clarification bulletins or adjustments. But the Commission does not have the power to actually amend the agreement itself. What I'm saying is that where there are administrative matters that need some clarification, the Commission would play an important role. But I have to emphasize, it depends on good faith on the parties to make the Commission process work.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Blakey for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Blydorp, I just wanted to come back to a comment you made earlier about pricing and the prices of your goods being set in the Chicago market. Often when we talk about trade deals, there's a tension between export-based agricultural producers and the supply-managed agricultural producers, and we often hear that we need to make concessions on supply management in order to expand our export markets. But then I've heard not just from you, but from pork producers as well, and others that despite increased market access, there's often problems either A, getting product to these new markets, and B, that having the increased demand of those added markets doesn't increase their price because the prices are tied to what's going on in the U.S. irrespective of market access to other countries. So I'd like for you to just maybe expand upon that a little bit more. I mean, how do we, if we're making concessions for our supply managed producers to increase the prospects of business for our exporters, how do we get to a point where the increased demand can actually issue in better prices for Canadian agricultural products that are being exported?
Well, it's a lot of it is sort of a base commodities, so they're not that differentiable, but there are certain markets that might buy a specifically type raised pork, for instance. There are some differentiation in the marketplace for various buyers that want certain animals produced in a certain way, so that might open something up. And there are some slight differences in what's allowed in animal production here in Canada and the U.S. in terms of drugs. I'm not a livestock farmer, so I don't know a whole lot about that, but I do know that there could occasionally be certain markets that are available to Canadian producers because they are generally smaller and they can produce to a specific requirement that some specific market might have. But yeah, most of the other commodities, pork and beef, particularly out west, beef and the grains and oilseeds, we're very reliant on trade. If we didn't have trade, we'd have the agriculture industry that we do have in Canada. And there was a Barton report a little while ago that saw agriculture as one of the greatest prospects for enhanced growth. And there's a lot of manufacturing that goes on of agriculture products. There's, I think, 2.3 million people that are employed in the agriculture sector, and most of that's beyond the farm gate.
But the product pricing is tied to U.S. indices, irrespective of what the international demand is. I mean, obviously, international demand plays a role in establishing those prices. But if Canadian producers have better market access, that doesn't mean that they're going to get a better price for their product because they're tied to what the U.S. price is. I mean, I realize it's going to differ based on the commodity, but is that generally true for your business?
I would have to have a very short answer.
Well, we're producing commodities and we have some benefit, and that's reflected in a basis, which is the difference between the Chicago price and a local price. Because we are closer to ports than somebody in North Dakota, we will have a slightly better price because we have a transportation advantage.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, on to, we have Mr. Holback and Mr. Badaway. Mr. Holback?
Yep, thank you, Chair. And just a couple quick questions and maybe a quick comment. I know there's been a lot of people saying, we need to get this done relatively quickly, and we agree. We're not doing anything to stall or delay this at all. But, one of the concerns I have is, as we talk to different associations and groups, we ask for the economic analysis or how they came to the conclusion that we should move forward with this agreement, and they all say they haven't done it. That's a little concerning. If I enter any type of agreement with a company and I'm going to go into a partnership with another company, first thing I do is an economic analysis. And, I get it. We've got the history to be our economic analysis to a certain point. Okay, that's fair. But this is totally different. And, so I'm a little concerned about that. But I am comfortable in knowing that an analysis is going to be coming in front of this committee relatively shortly. And you will have a chance to see that before this actually goes through clause by clause. So we're excited about that. Now, we didn't talk about how this agreement worked for competitiveness. And that was the function that I thought we really missed in going forward in this agreement. We didn't have a focus on what we could do to make North America a really strong, dynamic trading partnership bloc. Was this in the agreement? Do you see anything in there that kind of gives us some hope that this may do that?
Yes. The new Chapter 26 holds promise for us, just in the sense that it's going to try and coordinate all industry activity across the three countries to become more competitive. Our hope is that we don't lose sight of it, that it doesn't fall apart in implementation, which is why we're very gung-ho to get started on it, to set up the committee, and for us in Canada to show initiative on this.
So what do you see to set that part up? Like, I haven't seen anything in budgets. I haven't seen any allocation of resources
Yeah.
from the government to do that. What do you think you need for the appropriate resources from government to get that started?
Well, the chapter itself is pretty thin. I think it's a page long in total. So there's not a lot of guidance there from the agreement itself. But
that can be good or bad. It can be good because you can write it the way you want.
Well,
or,
it could give us a lot of creative room. True. But essentially, it's setting up committees, so between the three countries. So we don't see any reason why we have to wait to do that. If it's just setting up a committee, Canada should show leadership and work with our Americans and Mexican
any
partners.
definition on who's included in committees? Because, for example, First Nations, we're learning we need to include them in a lot more of the processes moving forward.
Absolutely.
Wouldn't that be and then how do we decide amongst First Nations who sits in that committee? Because of the different dynamics within the First Nations community too.
We'd be happy to leave the committee makeup to government, but certainly I agree that the more voices at the table, the better. Clearly, the ones with the biggest stake in the game should be there, but any other people similar to what were included in the original consultations would more than welcome and encouraged.
The frustrations I have with committees, they're great if they have
Sure.
action. But I don't see how that committee now, we're going to form it, but then I don't see the action coming back into the governments to say, okay, you need to do X, Y, Z this year. And then next year you're going to do X, Y, Z differently. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, you're going to make all these ideas to make us more competitive, but if it falls on deaf ears and there's no action, what's it good as a committee?
Well, exactly. It can't be like the last go around in the initial NAFTA, where there was a whole bunch of these sort of similar things that sort of fell by the wayside after a few months and years. That's our fear as well, because we see so much promise in that Chapter 26 competitiveness that whatever mechanism we can give it, and we can talk about this, is to give it teeth and to give it oomph, so it does have an impact. We also need willing partners too in the other countries, which might be a challenge at this time, but we really do see that turning NAFTA as a tool to create this North American trading bloc, more integrated, especially for manufacturing, is a win-win.
Okay, Leo, just a quick question with you. You know, one of the concerns I have is the non-tariff trade barriers that we're seeing going against our agriculture producers around the world and our inability to react. And as an example, Durban, Italy, there was no response to WTO. India and Pulses, no response to WTO. Is there something you see in this agreement that actually is going to tell our government, when we see things like this happening, that they actually have to do something to defend our producers?
Well, I haven't read the whole agreement, but I understand there's supposed to be some kind of dispute negotiating settlement process.
But
and I don't know what that is, but I'm surprised that nothing was initiated with this last round of support for especially soybean in the U.S. in 2018. I haven't heard anything. Maybe there's something that's transpired, but
crickets. Yeah. Okay.
That's an ongoing thing for us as farmers, and there's been lots of actions by the U.S. launched against Canadian farmers over the years. Some of them went to WTO, and many of them weren't successful, but it does really affect farmers in the process until that's settled for a long time. They're really badly, negatively impacted.
Years and then.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Badaway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. And once again, I do want to take this opportunity to thank you for allowing me to sit here in this seat today on this committee. As most members know, I am the chair of the Transportation, Infrastructure, and Communities Committee. And one of the reasons why I felt it very important to be here today was to, in fact, speak about the crossing of committees that this issue does do with respect to especially the investments, strategic investments in infrastructure. The second comment I do want to make before I ask a question is the fact of, or the expectation, quite frankly, and I think Mr. Herman hit it right on the head when he stated the fact that we're moving forward. NAFTA, or CUSMA, as we know it now, is something that's been negotiated by three countries, and it's time to turn the page, move forward, and look at the future of all three countries working closer together. More importantly, in really looking at the integration of our infrastructure investments, especially when it comes to transportation, whether it be rail, road, air, or water. The third thing I do want to say as well is that, and how imperative it is that those investments do work towards strengthening our overall international trade performance. So with that all said, and moving forward with those investments. I do want to ask a question to the Mayor of Windsor. Mr. Mayor, a former mayor myself, just down the lake from you, down in the Niagara area, so I can relate 100% with what you're doing on a daily basis with respect to being a border community, and of course the niches that are attached to your area, in your area being auto, in our area being steel, and I'll say and other. So my question to you, not only with your mayor's hat on, but also the hat of which you represent the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, is do you see and will you see strategic investments playing a major factor in strengthening our overall international global performance in terms of trade? Do you see those investments being critical? And lastly, what investments do you in fact seeing being made in an integrated fashion with our U.S. partners to then therefore once again strengthen our international trade performance?
Well, thank you very much for the question. I'll just reiterate and go back to one of the comments that I made in my remarks related to the Gordie Howe Bridge. And so this will be, approximately a $6 billion project, which taps into the Herb Gray Parkway, which is a multi-billion-dollar project to connect the 401 to this crossing. It will be the most efficient border crossing between Canada and the United States. It will have the highest and latest technology and will allow for communities close to the border, whether it's the city of Windsor, elsewhere in Essex, or all the way down the corridor, down the 401. I mean, it's really the backbone. We are the area, we're the backbone of what we call the NAFTA superhighway, all the way from Montreal down to Mexico. And all municipalities who are part of that spine, that backbone, certainly will benefit with the proper infrastructure in place. And so having a redundant border crossing, having a border crossing that is the most resilient and certainly has the most technology between Canada and the United States located right here, I think is a very positive sign, something that's been worked on since about the year 2000 or 2001. And you will see in a few short months the pillars, the support pillars for the bridge coming out of the ground. So I think all signs are very, very positive. And it's not been an easy task, but it's happening. And I think everyone in Canada serves to benefit who lives in a community along that backbone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'll be going into my committee in a few hours. And some of the motions that the committee will be considering is a study focusing on current and anticipated labor shortages in the Canadian transportation sector. We're looking at undertaking a study on Canada's rural digital infrastructure, prospective solutions to the gaps in wireless infrastructure deployment in Canada. And finally, and to your wheelhouse, is undertaking a study on the gas tax fund, in particular as it relates to working with you municipalities, Indigenous communities, and others to actually further your interests, your niches in different regions to, in fact, make those strategic infrastructure investments. Again, the auto sector being a niche of Windsor, what is the effects now? What is the positive effects now with this agreement? Not only this agreement, but also aligning with CIIT and CPTPP. What are some of the advantages that you're going to see coming down the road for Windsor and your area, but as well as some of those infrastructure investments that will help furthering your interests with respect to being a stronger trading partner?
So let me, on behalf of FCM, just reiterate our appreciation. All cities across Canada are appreciative of the doubling of the gas tax. It's been a crucial mechanism for municipalities to reinvest in transit systems and mobility solutions. And when I look at my own community, if I drill that down to my own community, looking at the infrastructure that we have here, one of the pieces of infrastructure, the border infrastructure I mentioned, was the Windsor-Detroit tunnel. And the city of Detroit owns their half, the city of Windsor owns our half. And we run that operation as one unit. But really, we're looking to the future to say, with respect to some of the things you mentioned about wireless technology and looking to the future of electrification or new energy vehicles, and looking how we could talk and get more into the autonomous vehicle world. There have been investments by all three levels of government in the city of Windsor to help support that, using our tunnel asset, our infrastructure here to help deal with the things that are unique to Windsor. So, you talk about testing autonomous vehicles. You could pretty much do that in any city across North America. There are so many similarities, but the one thing that's distinct for us here is that we can actually test it in a real live border environment on an asset that we own with a partner in the United States that we work very closely with on a daily basis. So we're using our strategic assets to really help advance the interest of our region and keep us in that new mobility world that is here and that is coming very quickly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. On to Mr. Dhaliwal.
Thank you to all the presenters coming out today. And my first question is going to go to Assembly of First Nations. I'm glad to hear from you that this is the most inclusive agreement that we have in Canadian history when it comes to particularly Indigenous women and young entrepreneurs doing well. And could you tell me what you as the First Nations representative will do to bring this awareness, and what government should do so as the Indigenous women and the young people can take the advantage of this agreement?
Sure. Thank you for the question, member. One of the things that, one of the forums really that we have in place right now includes the Chiefs in Assembly, where all the leaders have the opportunity to come together to discuss the new and different things that are happening across the country, as well as new initiatives that are in place. And then that information is then shared amongst the First Nation citizenry. So that would definitely be one opportunity. Plus, we have a network of committees, such as the Chiefs Committee on Economic Development, which brings together leaders from each of the First Nation regions across the country. And we have technical networks to help share the information and a reach to some of those organizations that are technical in nature that also have access to opportunities, I guess, email lists and whatnot. However, what we do know is that there needs to be, again, some work that has to happen to share that information. That right now there are not enough programs really that are in place to support the trade awareness building specifically for First Nations, including women, youth, and all portions of the economic sectors that we are looking to participate in.
Thank you. My next question goes to Mr. Harman. Mr. Harman, you were talking about election 1988. In any way, directly or indirectly, you weren't suggesting the opposition not to block this so as there is an election tomorrow and Liberals come back in majority.
I was not making partisan comments. I was simply repeating the historical record, and I was, I think, mentioning that it would be unprecedented for Parliament to refuse to ratify a trade agreement. It has never happened before in our history. And in 1988, before the legislation was put to Parliament, there was an election which clarified the issue, and Parliament then proceeded to enact the necessary legislation approving the original free trade agreement.
How important it is to get this agreement passed as it is, and now, today, than tomorrow?
I think it is critically important for Canada. I think the longer we delay in ratifying the agreement, the worse it is. I think Canada has to move ahead, and having negotiated and signed an agreement, I think it is incumbent, in my humble view, on this House and this committee to give the agreement its full approval and the implementing legislation to be reported out positively.
And Your Worship, Dilkins, do you agree with Mr. Harman that it should go right away and will help municipalities to grow?
That question was to Mayor Dilkins.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay, Mayor Dilkins, did you hear the question from Mr. Dhaliwal?
I did. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
You can.
I said absolutely, it should pass right away without delay. Let the inertia carry it over the finish line.
Thank you very much. I don't think any of us are looking for an election at all, not in the near future for sure. So, all right, thank you all to our witnesses. We very much appreciated all of your support and your comments back, and it's valuable information for the committee. Mr. Holbach, Mr. Chair.
Just a question on process with the clerks and the analysts. Like written submissions are coming into the committee, so I'm just kind of curious when there'll be the final submission date, and then when we'll have access to those written submissions, and how you're actually going to tabulate them, put them together into the final conclusion.
Can I respond to that?
I think the clerk needs to.
As they come in, they are sent to translation, and as soon as they are translated, they are distributed to the members.
Okay.
There's usually, because it's a bill, like there's no briefing note that usually is done by the analyst.
Okay.
We just go directly to clause by clause.
So then it's translation, and then after translation, we'll get a copy. Is that
you
fair to
get you
say?
get copies as soon as translation is out.
So you understand, or that translation understands the importance of getting this done in a timely fashion.
Yeah, they're doing their best. Their best.
And then
the deadline hasn't been set by the committee, but like what I write to the people is that like get your brief as soon as possible, because clause by clause is scheduled for probably next Thursday.
Okay. And then just again, we've all agreed that we're going to have the economic analysis before the committee. So I'm just kind of curious, have you got a date lined up for the presentation and when we'll actually receive those documents? Have we got any indication of that? Maybe through the Parliamentary Secretary, if you have, or?
The clerk has been in touch with that particular individual who was.
Yes, I haven't received anything from the department yet as for the document per se, but we are in contact to schedule Ms. Paquet.
Yeah. Could we?
We're pretty well done here. But
Yeah, we're done.
We're done?
Would we be able to get an update from the Parliamentary Secretary? Because it was a unanimous motion.
I think it's the clerk who's carrying that on. Can you respond to that?
It was certainly a unanimous motion. I'd be happy to get back to the committee with an update.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much.
Move adjournment. Thank you again to all of the wonderful witnesses. And I hope you all have a